Within the stark interior of the Planet Place office building, the confrontation ignited. An enraged Mr. Key demanded to know if Ijin had any concept of the identity of the man he had previously fought. Ijin's response was stoic and unwavering. He had simply been performing his duty as a bodyguard. Frustrated by this infuriating nonchalance, Mr. Key hurled an insult before revealing the staggering truth. The man was the head of marketing for KP Group and, more critically, the third son of the company's head. The weight of this revelation settled heavily as Mr. Key added that KP Group had just become a major investor in their agency, directly connecting the powerful man Ijin had assaulted to the fate of their careers. With venom in his voice, the head of marketing accused Ijin of ruining both Soa and the agency prospects, demanding he abandon his foolish bodyguard fantasy and quit immediately. Throughout the verbal assault, Ijin Yu stood perfectly still, absorbing the tirade with a stoic silence and no visible reaction. The tense moment was shattered when Soa interrupted, her sharp words cutting the executive down as she declared he had spoke out of turn. In a swift defense of her protector, she shifted the blame away from Ijin and commanded the man to apologize to Mr. Key instead. Following her outburst, Soa Cha's gaze remained locked on the head of marketing, her eyes burning with defiance. Mr. Key rushed to intervene, attempting to diffuse the palpable tension by apologizing on her behalf and attributing her sharp behavior to the immense stress from a recent stalker incident. The executive, however, casually dismissed the explanation, his interest clearly elsewhere. He then pivoted, revealing his secondary, more calculated motive for the visit. His attention settled squarely back on Soa as he confronted her directly about her failure to sign her contract, masterfully escalating the pressure and increasing his leverage over her. Mr. Key attempted to persuade Soa to sign her contract, highlighting her long-standing relationship with the agency and the favorable new conditions. But she internally recognized it as a coordinated tactic to force her into signing against her will. The head of marketing then brought up Ijin, declaring he could not tolerate such a violent person around Soa and revealing that the head of detail had already reported the boy as a problem, confirming the issue was premeditated. Soa passionately defended Ijin, insisting he had done nothing wrong and trying to explain the context of their previous encounter. Her impassioned plea was swiftly interrupted by the executive, who manipulated her defense and accused her directly, asking if Ijin was the reason she had been so rude to him. A wave of pure frustration crashed over Soa at the head of marketing's possessive and controlling suspicions. Her patience finally snapping, she confronted him directly, her voice sharp as she clarified that Ijin was just a bodyguard and his baseless accusations were merely a pathetic inability to move on from their breakup. The man's lips curled into a cruel smirk as he twisted her very words into a weapon, challenging that if Ijin was so insignificant, then she surely couldn't object to him being fired. He escalated the pressure, cornering her completely by branding Ijin as violent and untrustworthy. His final question a venomous demand for her agreement. Soa Cha boldly confronted the head of marketing, accusing him of using Ijin as a scapegoat to vent his frustration over her contract renewal. The executive, however, coolly dismissed her words, expressing his confidence that she would sign regardless and masking his intentions with a false claim about public safety. Attempting to de-escalate the rising tension, Soa offered a compromise, suggesting that he should be satisfied with having Ijin simply removed from her security detail. Her offer was met with a furious refusal. His professional veneer shattered as he cited the deep, personal humiliation he had suffered at Ijin's hands as the true reason he sought further retribution, pressuring her to sign the contract. He then gave the chilling order for Ijin to be brought into the room, preparing for the inevitable, direct confrontation he so desperately craved. The tense negotiation commenced as the head of marketing for KP Group addressed Soa and her representative, overwhelmed by the antagonistic atmosphere. A desperate urge to flee the suffocating situation consumed Soa. The executive then shifted his focus, turning his verbal assault toward Ijin. He openly insulted the young man, explaining away his supposed recklessness by callously dismissing him as a mere little kid. With cold finality, Mr. Key informed Ijin Yu that he was being removed from Soa's security detail. His company would be notified, the older man stated, instructing him to leave at once. From the side, the head of marketing and the head of detail watched the dismissal unfold with undisguised satisfaction, their victory palpable. So-a, however, looked on with visible distress, her features tight with concern for Ijin's fate. Mr. Ki then condescendingly rushed the young man out, telling him not to be late for his next engagement. But Ijin Yu did not move. He remained completely still and silent, a statue of quiet defiance against the command. As the head of detail placed a hand on Ijin's shoulder, informing him that he was dismissed and that they should speak outside. Ijin remained perfectly still, a silent and unmoving refusal. The man's grip tightened, his impatience flaring as he repeated the demand to leave. In a sudden, decisive motion, Ijin's hand shot up and seized the head of detail's wrist, arresting his movement completely. A cold warning followed not to touch him, as Ijin declared with finality that his assignment was not yet over. Following a rushed apology to his superior, the head of detail grabbed Ijin's arm, attempting to forcibly remove him from the room. He hissed an insult, demanding they step outside to avoid a greater disturbance. It was then that So-a intervened, her voice sharp as she told Ijin to go home, publicly declaring that he was no longer her bodyguard. When the young man didn't move, her command turned into a desperate yell for him to leave. Yet Ijin remained utterly silent and motionless, his stillness a clear and defiant refusal of her order. Amidst the head of marketing's aggressive yells for him to obey So-a's dismissal, the head of detail moved to intervene. He placed a hand on Ijin's shoulder, intending to forcibly escort him out. The reaction was instantaneous. Before any force could be applied, Ijin seized the man's hand and twisted his wrist with brutal efficiency. A painful, bone-creaking sound echoed as the threat was instantly neutralized. Just as the head of detail reached out to physically remove him, Ijin Yu brought the man to a sudden halt. There seems to be a misunderstanding, he stated, his voice unexpectedly calm. His gaze was intense and unwavering, fixed directly on the antagonists before him. The head of detail could only stare, his face a mask of pure shock at the boy's sudden and absolute defiance. Within Ijin Yu, a cold certainty settled. The executive before him remained utterly oblivious to the true danger he was in. His voice, calm and cutting, broke the silence as he declared that he had already analyzed the entire situation. Ijin began to methodically deconstruct their cheap ploy, explaining how the stalker had been a complete fabrication, a threat manufactured to coincide perfectly with Miss Cha's contract renewal. This, he continued, was merely a flimsy excuse to place her under constant surveillance, all under the false banner of protection. He then delivered the final blow, revealing the desperate motive behind it all. Sterling Entertainment had been teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, crippled by gross mismanagement, right before KP Group's timely investment had saved them from ruin. With the phone pressed to his ear, Ijin Yu continued the conversation, calmly explaining his understanding that Miss Cha was the agency's most valuable asset and that her departure would constitute a great loss. He then revealed that he was also fully aware of the threats she had received for her unwillingness to renew her contract. On the other end of the line, the Sterling Entertainment executive was left completely stunned, his mind racing as he wondered how the boy could possibly know so much about the scheme. Elsewhere, Ijin's friends grew frustrated, complaining that he had left their game yet again for a phone call and telling him he should just turn it off. With the lead thug already defeated, Ijin stood with an unnerving calm as another attacker charged him from behind in a last-ditch surprise assault. He didn't even grant the man a glance. In a single, fluid motion, Ijin whipped out a powerful kick that connected squarely with his pursuer's face, dispatching the final threat with contemptuous ease. The brief interruption handled, he calmly proceeded with his phone call to Major Kang. The Major's voice came through, acknowledging a text he had received and demanding to know Ijin's position. "I'm in the parking lot of the Stew office building," Ijin reported, his voice steady and cool. As a distressed Ms. Cha declared her desire to leave, the lead thug aggressively seized her arm, insulting her and telling her she couldn't go. In an instant, Ijin Yu stepped in, his hand closing around the thug's wrist to force his release. Startled and angered, the man turned his attention toward Ijin, but he was given no time to react. Ijin twisted the captured arm in a sharp, painful motion until the bone broke. He immediately completed the takedown with a swift kick to the thug's supporting leg, causing him to collapse to the ground in agony. In a single, violent motion, Ijin slammed the lead thug's head into the car's steering wheel, incapacitating him instantly. The remaining thugs could only look on in stunned disbelief, frozen by the shocking swiftness of their leader's defeat. Standing calmly over his fallen opponent, Ijin turned his cold attention toward the terrified henchmen, internally dismissing them as nothing more than mere pawns. Major Kang Hamchan stood over the kneeling, defeated form of the Sterling Entertainment executive. After a final, dismissive glance at the man's phone, he let it drop to the ground. A heavy boot came down with contemptuous force, emphatically crushing the device into splintered fragments. The executive flinched violently as Kang loomed over him, an aura of pure menace radiating from his frame. Bending low, the major delivered a chilling threat that struck the man dumb, leaving him frozen and utterly paralyzed with terror. With the physical threat neutralized, Ijin Yu stood over the defeated lead thug and the panicked Sterling Entertainment executive. Unfazed by the preceding conflict, he calmly retrieved his phone and placed a call for backup, specifically contacting Major Kang Hamchan. Shortly thereafter, a car arrived, and from it, Major Kang and Soa Lim stepped out, approaching with an unmistakable air of authority. They moved to confront the terrified executive, officially taking command of the situation from Ijin. Major Kang Hamchan and Soa Lim arrived, their gazes sweeping over the aftermath of Ijin's brutal fight with the thugs. The major immediately confronted the Sterling Entertainment executive, his voice sharp as he questioned the obvious discrepancy between the man's story and the group of hired muscle now littering the ground. The terrified executive tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, but Major Kang cut him off, sarcastically asking if this collection of brutes was the stalker in question. As the executive faltered under the pressure, Soa Lim stepped forward, calmly introducing herself as a representative from SW Group's entertainment division. A wave of pure shock and terror washed over the executive's face, the name of the powerful conglomerate striking him with the force of a physical blow as he realized who he had truly provoked. While on the phone, Ijin confirmed that a suspicious individual was indeed loitering outside Ms. Char's house and requested proof. Shortly thereafter, a group of hired thugs arrived, affirming they had been sent by Sterling Entertainment to intimidate the woman of the house, whom they believed to be alone. Unbeknownst to them, Ijin was already inside the darkened home. Anticipating their arrival, the men violently broke down the front door and began calling out for Ms. Cha, their voices echoing in the entryway. Just then, Ijin revealed himself from the deep shadows, his unexpected presence utterly surprising the intruders. The lead thug pointed, his voice laced with a venomous threat as he demanded to know if Ijin truly understood who he was facing. Unfazed by the bluster, Ijin's hand shot out and seized the man's outstretched finger. With an effortless application of pressure, he bent the digit back, forcing the thug to collapse to the ground in a heap of agony. Writhing on the pavement, the defeated man could only gasp out a final, desperate vow to ruin him. It was at that moment Major Kang Hamchan and Soa Lim arrived. Major Kang's calm words cut through the tension, confirming that Ijin had called him earlier and that the situation was now firmly under their control. A new power had entered the fray. Soa Lim, the brilliant granddaughter of the SW Group's chairman and the sharp mind commanding its entertainment division, she and Major Kang Hamchan had arrived, presenting a united and formidable front that instantly altered the balance of power. The Sterling Entertainment executive simply stared, his face a mask of pure shock and disbelief at their sudden appearance. Snapping out of his stupor, he confronted them, his voice laced with fury as he angrily demanded to know why they were there. Unfazed by the thugs threatening him, Ijin Yu calmly offered to help them all reach an understanding. His quiet confidence was all the provocation the lead thug needed. The man's fist clenched tightly as he threw a vicious punch, aiming to connect directly with Ijin's face. Yet, the blow met only empty air. With minimal effort, Ijin simply leaned back, the attack whistling harmlessly past him. The lead thug was left completely stunned, his arm still extended in the failed strike. Shock and bewilderment flooded his mind as he stared at the teenager. Unable to comprehend his impossible speed and wondering just who this kid truly was. With brutal swiftness, Major Kang Hamchan appeared, his hand shooting out to seize the Sterling Entertainment executive by the collar. The major loomed over the trembling man, his voice a low threat as he inquired about his next engagement. A choked gasp of shock and fear escaped the executive as he stared up at the imposing figure. Just then, a second presence made itself known. Soa Lim was standing directly behind Major Kang, observing the exchange with a cold, authoritative expression. The executive's terror instantly intensified. His blood running cold as recognition dawned. He was in the presence of the powerful and unforgiving head of SW's entertainment division. Soa Cha awoke in her bed, a profound shock registering on her face as she realized she had slept for a full 10 hours straight. For someone plagued by a sleep disorder, such a deep, uninterrupted rest was unheard of. And she knew instantly that it must have been because her persistent stress had finally lifted. Her mind drifted back to the moment an SW executive informed her that all the legal matters with her previous agency had been completely handled. He had confirmed it. She was now a free agent, at liberty to work with whomever she chose. Yet, even as the weight of that freedom settled in, a quiet thought surfaced. The conflict with her agency had only ever been half of her problem. The SW executive delivered the news with calm finality. Dongjian Qi was no longer a threat to Soa. He then revealed the full scope of the man's villainy, explaining that the company had discovered Qi was also menacing her parents and had already taken the necessary measures to stop him. For her complete peace of mind, he added that Qi's former company had entirely disavowed his actions, guaranteeing no further harm would ever befall her family. A bewildered Soa, struggling to process the immense scale of this intervention, could only ask why the SW group had gone to such extraordinary lengths to help her. The executive conceded a certain business interest, but he made it clear that the primary reason for their actions was Ijin's resolute commitment to fully carrying out his duties as her bodyguard. As Ijin Yu stared down at his phone, his thoughts dwelled upon the conclusion of his duties. At that moment, Soa Cha found herself approached by an employee from the SW group. The man, Suhan Kang, stepped forward and formally introduced himself, informing her that he was to be her new security detail and confirming, with his very presence, that Ijin's assignment had officially come to an end. As the off-screen interviewer's question about her challenging new role hung in the air, Soa Cha began her answer with professional poise. She admitted to her initial worries but explained that her profound admiration for the original work had ultimately convinced her to accept the part. Yet, even as the polished words left her lips, her mind was a world away. Her thoughts spiraled, fixating on Ijin and the unanswered questions he left behind. Why had he quit so suddenly? And why, after everything, hadn't he told her himself? The carefully constructed facade began to crumble from within, leaving her visibly distracted and troubled. Her gaze lost to the silent confusion of his sudden departure. The SW executive calmly informed Ijin that Soa Cha would soon be signing with their entertainment division, confirming that her old agency and Dongjian Qi had been dealt with permanently. He explained that the company had used incriminating information to silence the antagonists, whose illegal operations had made them vulnerable. The executive was clear that the credit belonged to Ijin. SW was merely fulfilling its duty as Ijin himself had insisted upon during a late-night call to Mr. Park. He even added a light-hearted comment about how Mr. Park had grumbled over being disturbed at such an hour. Internally, however, the man reflected on his own surprise, admitting he had wrongly assumed Ijin would just be coasting on the job and had never anticipated such effectiveness. The question was fired directly, cutting through the classroom chatter. Had he truly been Soa Cha's bodyguard? A brief flicker of surprise crossed Ijin Yu's face at the sudden inquiry. Before he could formulate a reply, a female classmate chimed in with breathless excitement, professing her admiration for the famous actress and lamenting the missed chance to ask for an autograph. As the first boy remarked on how cool the job must have been, the surrounding curiosity was met with a stark contrast. Ijin's gaze fell, and he became utterly still, his silence deep and pensive. A stylishly dressed woman, her face hidden by a mask, stepped into Ijin Yu's classroom, instantly drawing the full attention of his peers. With a fluid motion, she pulled the mask away and cheerfully greeted Ijin, pretending their meeting at his school was a simple coincidence. She playfully claimed she was just there for a meeting, an explanation that was met by Ijin's stoic and surprised silence. All around him, his classmates were left completely starstruck, captivated by the celebrity's sudden and unexpected arrival. Soa-cha offered her sincere thanks to Ijin for everything he had done to help her. But he deflected the gratitude, insisting he was simply performing his job duties. He then revealed the reason he had quit the assignment. He had strained himself and aggravated a past wound, concluding that he was no longer fit to protect her. Alarmed, Soa asked if he had been injured while working, but Ijin clarified it was a pre-existing injury. He downplayed the seriousness of his condition, casually mentioning it was just a broken rib, which prompted Soa to react with disbelief and heightened concern, questioning his very definition of being fine. Soa-cha stood before a surprised Ijin, her purpose clear as she extended her hand. In her palm rested a small, folded piece of paper which, when revealed, held her personal phone number. She explained its profound exclusivity, a contact she shared only with her parents. A warm smile bloomed across her face as she told Ijin to consider himself lucky. A gesture that spoke volumes of her gratitude, brimming with gratitude for his aid. Soa-cha earnestly asked Ijin if there was anything he desired, wanting to show her sincere appreciation. The young man paused, falling into a silent contemplation as he seemed to formulate a quiet request later. At a bustling high school, a sudden gasp of surprise rippled through a crowd of students. Among them Ijin's sister, Da-yun. The cause of their astonishment was soon revealed, for Soa-cha herself had arrived at the school gates specifically to greet the young girl, thereby fulfilling her brother's unspoken wish. As Ijin wandered through the school hallway, his thoughts consumed by what he should buy for dinner, his steps came to an abrupt halt. His surprised gaze fell upon an unexpected figure standing in the corridor. The famous actress, Soa-cha. With a cheerful tone, she called out directly to his sister, wishing Da-yun a happy birthday by name. The personal greeting left Da-yun utterly shocked and flustered. A single, frantic question echoed in her mind. How could a celebrity like Soa-cha possibly know her name and the day she was born? As Soa-cha proposed taking a selfie, word of her presence on campus began to spread like wildfire. A ripple of shock and speculation turned into a tidal wave among the students, who couldn't fathom why such a famous celebrity was at their school. This collective disbelief quickly morphed into a fervent excitement, compelling them to surge from their classrooms, all rushing to her location in a desperate attempt to see her in person. Surrounded by armed men, the injured mercenary, 032, was down on the ground. A masked interrogator held him at gunpoint, demanding to know who his client was. In response, a defiant laugh escaped 032 as he taunted his captor, implying that an organization known as Camp should have already possessed that information. As the interrogator's frustration mounted, another mercenary from Camp stepped in, halting the aggressive questioning to take over himself. As the gift box was opened, a delicate necklace lay revealed within. Ijin Yu presented it to his sister, Da-yun, stating simply that it was his gift for her. He then produced a second present, a new phone, reminding her of the promise he had made to buy one. Da-yun protested lightly, insisting her current phone was still fine, but Ijin merely restated that the necklace was also his gift. His generosity unwavering. There they lay, the expensive necklace and the new phone, a silent testament to a promise fulfilled and a brother's quiet affection. A gasp of disbelief escaped Da-yun as she opened her gift, revealing a brand new, SMSONG, laptop gleaming within the box. She immediately protested that it was far too expensive, questioning how Ijin could have possibly afforded such a high-end model that had only just been released. Ijin, however, remained calm, simply telling her not to worry about the cost. He explained that he knew she had been inconvenienced by not having a computer in her room. As his words registered, Da-yun looked at her brother, her eyes filled with emotion, deeply touched and moved by his incredibly thoughtful and generous present. As his phone rang, Ijin Yu answered the call, The voice on the other end belonged to Yuna Shin, who explained she was on a break and simply wanted to check in. With gentle curiosity, she asked if he was having a nice birthday celebration with his sister. Dayun. Ijin confirmed they were in the middle of it, then took a moment to thank Yuna for what she had done for his sister. Yuna humbly deflected his gratitude, remarking that she had enjoyed chatting with the sweet Dayun. As her words faded, Ijin fell quiet, listening to her in contemplative silence. Over the phone, Yuna's voice was laced with concern as she asked Ijin if he was truly okay to attend security training with his recent injury. He confirmed he was going, but assured her he would keep the session light to avoid aggravating his wound. When she then asked if he was free the day after tomorrow, Ijin stated that he would be training then as well. Her sarcastic comment that his schedule sounds like fun was met with a dry refutation. With little else to discuss, Yuna announced she had to get back on set, ending the conversation with a promise to call him another time. The quiet of the night was broken by an incoming call. Ijin Yu answered, his expression hardening into one of grave seriousness as he listened. On the other end of the line, his informant's voice was sharp with urgency, delivering the critical news. It just entered the country today. Without a moment's pause, the request followed, insistent and direct. Can we meet? Quote. With an apology for the intrusion, the informant explained that he had urgent information to confirm. He stated that the mercenary who ambushed 032 had failed and retreated to camp for one specific reason. He had heard that Ijin was still alive. A critical contradiction, however, unraveled the official story. According to the informant's sources, 032 had never actually returned to camp after his desertion, revealing the accepted truth as a lie and the boy's whereabouts as a complete mystery. The informant's words struck a nerve. 032 had been ambushed by someone from the camp. A cold fury surfaced in Ijin Yu, his hand balling into a tight, white-knuckled fist. The informant elaborated quickly, clarifying that the attacker was not another number, but a common mercenary who had acted without any official authorization during a retrieval mission. This was the bitter fruit of a growing problem. The animosity from other mercenaries towards the numbers had festered and worsened since Ijin had left, exacerbated by the arrival of new recruits. Ijin remained perfectly still, his expression hardening as he silently processed the deeply disturbing information. Within the stark memory of the past, a fellow camp mercenary violently restrained 032, demanding to know why he had deserted his post without permission. Even with a firm grip on him, 032 offered only a sharp, sarcastic retort, mockingly comparing the man's furious interrogation to that of a cheating spouse. The defiance ignited the rogue mercenary's fury. His fingers tightened brutally around 32's throat as he leaned in and delivered a venomous threat. In the cold rain of a desolate alley, the rogue camp mercenary threatened 32's life, demanding answers he refused to give. Frustrated by the unyielding silence, the mercenary sighed that it was like listening to a different language. With nothing gained, he turned his back and walked away, leaving the other soldier to his fate. As his interrogator vanished into the downpour, the badly injured 032 finally succumbed to his wounds and collapsed. With newfound resolve, the informant announced his plan to track down 032, trusting a gut feeling about his whereabouts. Ijin Yu immediately cautioned him, pointing out that such an action would undoubtedly alert the camp to the fact that he was still alive. After a moment of heavy contemplation, the informant revealed his unyielding motivation. 032 was the only family he had left, making any risk entirely acceptable. The informant began by recalling their unique history, reminding Ijin that the numbers had always been a class apart, possessing the rare right to refuse the camp's orders. A grim truth followed this reminder. A rogue mercenary, acting without official sanction, had staged an ambush against one of them. The victim's designation was then spoken into the tense air. It was 032, a figure from their shared, violent past with raw conviction. The man confessed his personal connection, explaining that 032 was the only family he had left in the world. His declaration concluded with unyielding resolve, a vow that he himself would find his lost brother. His friends approached, their questions about his supposed vacation ringing with an innocent cheerfulness. He corrected them, stating flatly that he had been away on business. a claim that was met with a skeptical reply from one in the group. Without offering any further explanation, the protagonist turned his back on them, his expression a stoic mask as he walked away. Left in his wake, his companions could only watch him go, their conversation shifting to whispers about his sudden and unexplained disappearance from the day before, after a teenager casually denied being on vacation to friends asking for a souvenir. The world plunged into darkness. Under the cover of night, two tactical operatives surveyed a bleak outdoor environment. The light-haired operative confirmed their intelligence placed an enemy hideout within a 10-kilometer radius. His dark-haired companion agreed, noting this was the likely location of their missing teammate, 032, based on his last known position. With their purpose set, the light-haired operative affirmed their partnership, readying them both to proceed with the critical mission ahead. Within the command center, attention shifted to the bearded intelligence officer. His colleague having just noted a change in his demeanor, he reported grimly that camp had confirmed their operative, Aiden, was still off the grid. A deep concern settled on his features as he reasoned that the agent would never maintain radio silence for so long unless something had happened to him. The primary problem, he finally concluded, was their complete lack of knowledge regarding Aiden's orders from camp, a critical omission that had left him entirely in the dark. The blonde intelligence officer seethed with hatred for the number bastards, despising the ruthless training methods camp employed to guarantee the silence of its child operatives. His bearded colleague, eyes fixed upon a map, expressed a quiet relief that their own agent, Aiden, had been spared such a place. That relief was shattered in the next breath. However, as the officer revealed a grim truth, they had lost all contact with Aiden. Compounding the crisis, he concluded that all information from camp had also ceased. Linking the two sudden disappearances into a single critical intelligence blackout, from the air, 004 launched himself downward, his heel a descending blade aimed at his target. The light-haired operative reacted in a flash, throwing up a forearm to defend against the sudden assault. The block held, but the immense force of the impact sent him skidding violently backward across the floor. As he fought for purchase, a chilling analysis cut through the chaos. The kick had been inefficient, a theatrical move done merely for fun. This opponent was no mere soldier. He was another number, one of the monsters forged in the camp. The thought had barely formed before 004 followed up, a low sweeping kick aimed at his legs. The operative sprang into the air, narrowly clearing the attack, but he had fallen right into the trap. Before his feet could touch the ground, 004 pivoted with blinding speed, his momentum flowing seamlessly into a second high kick that slammed into the side of the operative's head. The connection was absolute, a single, powerful blow that instantly incapacitated him. A sudden noise shattered the grim quiet of the massacre site, putting the light-haired operative on instant alert. From the shadows, the antagonist known as 004 appeared, neutralizing his dark-haired companion with a single, taser-like touch to the shoulder. The operative spun around, a warning cry dying on his lips as he realized it was already too late. With a contemptuous kick, 004 sent the incapacitated body skidding away, coolly taunting that the man had been too slow. In a fluid motion, the remaining operative drew his sidearm, leveling it squarely at the assailant and ordering him not to move. A smirk spread across 04's face as he dismissed the threat, chillingly stating that a gun wouldn't work on him. Upon their arrival, the two tactical operatives were met with a grim tableau of slaughter. The ground littered with numerous fallen bodies. The light-haired operative's breath caught in his throat as he surveyed the carnage, a stunned question forming on his lips as to what could have happened. A chilling recognition then settled in as he identified some of the dead as mercenaries recruited by the camp only a few years prior. Kneeling beside a corpse for a closer look, his trained eye observed the chilling efficiency of the attacker. The wounds were fresh, impossibly clean stabs driven into vital areas. A professional execution. Rising with grim determination, he instructed his partner to spread out, knowing they had to assess the full, horrifying extent of the massacre. Stepping into the room was to step into an abattoir. The bodies of the camp's mercenaries sprawled across the floor. The light-haired operative moved without hesitation, dropping to one knee beside a fallen man to check for vital signs. To his surprise, he found a faint, shallow breath, a lone survivor clinging to life amidst the slaughter. He rose, his gaze sweeping over the other victims for a forensic assessment. A grim pattern emerged from the carnage. The man at the front had been cleanly dispatched by a gunshot, while the two mercenaries behind him were cut down by a bladed weapon. With a sickening squelch, a mercenary was brutally pinned against the wall by his unseen assailant. The attacker was then revealed to be the operative 004, who stood calmly amidst the carnage of numerous defeated bodies. A voice suddenly crackled to life over his communications link. An unidentified contact who immediately began to criticize 04's inefficient methods. The voice questioned why he had insisted on engaging in close combat instead of simply eliminating all targets from a safe distance with his rifle. In response to the tactical critique, 004 merely offered a subtle, self-satisfied smirk, a silent testament to the enjoyment he took in his dangerous work. With his opponent already on the ground, 004 verbally mocked the very idea of fighting safely, revealing his own preference for a more thrilling combat style. Spurred to action, the downed man scrambled back to his feet and charged directly forward. A confident smirk spread across 04's face as he easily dodged the attack, seizing his adversary's arm in a single, fluid motion, effortlessly using the man's own momentum against him. 004 executed a clean shoulder throw, slamming him forcefully back to the ground once more. With his light-haired companion already lying defeated, the dark-haired operative desperately drew his pistol on 004. It was a fatal mistake. Moving with blinding speed, 004 closed the distance in a heartbeat, his hand seizing the operative's wrist before a shot could be fired. In one devastatingly fluid motion, he twisted the man's arm to disarm him while simultaneously delivering a powerful kick square to his torso. The dark-haired operative was knocked unconscious, collapsing to the ground beside his fallen partner. 004 stood triumphantly over the two incapacitated men, a smug, sadistic grin spreading across his face. With a sudden explosion of brutal efficiency, 004 began his assault. His legs snapped out, kicking one mercenary squarely in the head, while his hand simultaneously shot out to seize the arm of another. Using the man's own weight as leverage, he violently slammed him to the ground, snapping the captured limb over his knee. An instant later, he deflected a desperate knife attack from a third assailant with his forearm. The counter was immediate and vicious. A powerful elbow crashed into the knife wielder's face. Before the man could fall, 004 grabbed his stunned head and smashed it downward into his rising knee. In the quiet aftermath, he stood victorious, a lone figure amidst the broken bodies of the defeated mercenaries. In a brutal explosion of movement, 004 lunged at the two operatives, his fist aimed squarely at the light-haired man. The operative threw up his forearm in a desperate block, but the overwhelming force of the strike resulted in the sickening crack of his own bone. Ignoring the grievous injury he had just inflicted, 004 immediately flowed into his next attack, launching a vicious high kick at the man's head. The light-haired operative ducked, narrowly evading the blow, but the kick continued its deadly arc. It connected with a sickening thud against the head of his dark-haired partner, who was instantly knocked unconscious. The operative could only watch in shock as his comrade collapsed limply to the ground. With the dark-haired operative already incapacitated, 004 openly expressed his disappointment at how effortless the fight had become. A sudden cry of, "Die!" tore through the air as the light-haired operative launched a surprise knife attack from behind. Unfazed, 004 calmly turned and caught the descending arm, effortlessly halting the assault. In a single, fluid motion, he twisted the man's limb, disarming him and wrenching him into a painful submission hold that served as a brutal demonstration of his superior skill. Kneeling among the fallen, the light-haired operative methodically examined the corpses of the camp mercenaries. His grim survey came to an abrupt halt as he realized one of the bodies still drew a shallow breath. He announced this startling discovery to his partner, whose attention was immediately wrenched from his own task by the sheer surprise of the find. The operative known as 004 verbally confronted Ijin, hissing a threat for the simple crime of surviving their last encounter. A quiet understanding dawned on Ijin as he realized he had been mistaken for one of the other mercenaries. Calmly accepting the misguided challenge, he shrugged off his jacket to prepare for the inevitable conflict. Without another word, 004 lunged forward, throwing a powerful punch meant to end the fight. Ijin, however, moved with fluid ease, ducking cleanly underneath the incoming blow. Before his opponent could recover from the wild miss, Ijin countered, delivering a single, swift kick that landed with brutal force in 04's midsection. Late at night, Ijin made his way through the quiet neighborhood, finally arriving at the familiar sight of his own house. He slipped inside, attempting to make no sound, but was met by the waiting figure of his sister, Da-yun, who was still awake. She immediately told him that he was late and that their grandfather had been worried. Her gaze then scanned him over as she asked if he was hurt. But Ijin quietly confirmed that he was not. The stillness of the late hour settled over the quiet neighborhood as Ijin Yu walked home. The moment he opened the front door, however, the silence was broken by his sister, Da-yun, who had been anxiously waiting up for him. A lecture immediately followed. She scolded him for his lateness and for being unreachable, letting him know how deeply their grandfather had worried. Yet, her frustration soon gave way to profound relief as she confessed her gladness that he had returned safely. Just as the weight of that conversation lifted, a sharp vibration from his phone drew his attention. A new message had arrived from his classmate, Soa Cha. A late-night message from Soa Cha suddenly illuminated Ijin Yu's phone. Its text a simple question of his availability. Yet, before his fingers could form a response, the screen erupted with an incoming call from the very same person. He answered. It was Soa, her voice cutting through the quiet as she explained there was something important she had to tell him, something that had to be said in person. Her words then formed an urgent plea, asking if they could meet right now. The request hung in the air, leaving Ijin to silently consider her sudden summons. A powerful punch from Ijin slammed into 04's face, the sheer force of the blow sending him reeling backward. As he stumbled, a chilling thought cut through the haze of pain. This was no mere camp mercenary. The skill, the power, it was all on another level entirely. He stared at his opponent, his expression twisting from grim determination into one of dawning horror and complete disbelief. All internal assessment trailed off into shocked silence as he seemingly recognized the legendary fighter standing before him. A sudden sound of footsteps shattered the silence, and a chilling realization struck Ijin. 004 had not come alone. From the enveloping darkness, another figure emerged, carrying an injured comrade, 032. In his arms he gently laid the wounded man on the ground as Ijin's mind reeled with recognition. They were more numbers, ghosts from his past at the camp. With his grim task complete, the dark-haired man slowly raised his head, his gaze locking directly with Ijin's in a silent, heavy confrontation. Stepping into the aftermath, the dark-haired man carried the limp form of his injured comrade, 032, his gaze sweeping over the bodies Ijin had left in his wake. He recognized the handiwork at once. This was the brutal efficiency of 001. A question briefly surfaced as to why Ijin was there, but he quickly deduced that since the mercenaries were all dead, he certainly hadn't been their ally. He dismissed the thought as unimportant, his focus snapping back to the dire state of his partner. With a look of deep concern for his wounded comrade, he turned and began carrying 032 away from the carnage, his new priority being to find immediate medical help. Gauging the dire state of the injured 032, Ijin implored his other former comrade to come with him, offering a practical solution. He knew someone within the country who could provide the immediate medical treatment necessary before they could even consider traveling. The dark-haired comrade, however, firmly rejected the offer, explaining that to stay with Ijin would only put him in danger. He emphasized that Ijin now had a life of his own to protect, a reality completely separate from the violent past they once shared. Finally, expressing his gratitude for the help already rendered, he made it clear that for Ijin's own safety, their paths had to diverge. With his decision made, Ijin turned his back on his former comrades to walk his own path. The solitary journey took him through the deep shadows of an underpass, from which he emerged onto a city street. There, he hailed a taxi, and as the vehicle departed, It carried him away, finalizing his departure. Late in the evening, Ijin's phone rang, the screen illuminating with a call from the class rep, Soa-cha. He answered, and a flustered Soa immediately came through the line. Apologizing for calling at such an hour, Ijin calmly reassured her that she hadn't woken him. With that, she stated that she had something to tell him and requested that they meet the following day. Under the cloak of night, Ijin Yu let himself into the darkened house. His quiet entrance, however, did not go unnoticed. A lone figure hunched over her studies at a table looked up. It was his sister, Da-yun, and her greeting was laced with palpable concern. She informed him that their grandfather had also kept vigil, having only just retired to bed moments before his arrival. In the quiet of the late hour, Da-yun's words reached Ijin, telling him how their grandfather had missed him and felt the house was empty while he was gone. With gentle concern, she then asked if he had been able to take care of his business. She held out a simple offering, a sandwich she had made just for him. A quiet, thanks, was all he offered in return as he accepted the food. In the moments that followed, a profound silence settled, leaving Ijin to eat the sandwich, completely alone. Late one night, while in his room, Ijin received a text from his classmate, Soa-cha, asking if he was asleep. He replied that he was still awake, and immediately after his response was sent, his phone began to ring. It was Soa. Ijin answered the call, listening as she explained her preference for speaking over texting, citing her frequent typos. She then asked if he was free to meet and talk the following day. A sudden request that left Ijin visibly surprised. As he walked away, Ijin Yu offered to travel to his former comrade's training location to assist them, reassuring them that the journey would not take long. Behind him, the dark-haired number simply watched the departure, his expression silent and somber. With his phone pressed to his ear, Ijin Yu received the update from his contact, Jae-hyung. His target was confirmed to be absent from school for the day. A concerned expression flickered across his face as he ended the call. The mundane chatter of student life immediately swelling to fill the silence. Two girls ambled past, their conversation a dismissive critique of an actress they deemed full of herself after a poor performance. As Ijin continued across the grounds, he drew the attention of another group of female students, who openly commented on how handsome he was. But their whispers and the surrounding gossip went unnoticed, failing to penetrate his focus. His face remained serious, a mask of unwavering resolve as he contemplated his objective. Amidst the chatter of female students, cruel words about Soa-cha's acting cut through the air, their speculation painting her fame not as a product of talent, but of her agency influence. The venomous critique reached her brother, and the world around him fell away, replaced by an imaginary confrontation with his sister. He questioned the imagined Soa directly, his internal monologue chiding her for the poor performance that invited such mockery. Yet, as his frustration crested, it suddenly broke into a wave of quiet empathy. The silent conversation concluded with an admission. Acting was difficult, and he, too, was simply trying his best to improve. The cruel taunts began, echoing the vicious school gossip about Soa-cha's poor acting as her brother was made the target. Words escalated swiftly to violence when a bully violently shoved him, slamming his body against a hard wall. Fists followed without hesitation, raining down repeated, punishing blows to his face and stomach. His strength finally gave out, and he collapsed to the ground, utterly defeated by the assault. As he lay there, a single, resigned thought surfaced in the haze of pain, a quiet admission of self-blame. I'm getting what I deserve. With his phone held to his ear, Ijin Yu made a call, his voice laced with concern. He questioned the person on the other end, asking why they had not come to school, a fact he had learned from Jae-hyung. His worry became more evident as he explained that he knew they had left for school early but had never arrived. From a distance, a group of female students watched him, their attention captivated, though they could not see his face clearly. They whispered amongst themselves about how incredibly cool he looked. A group of male students clustered around a phone, their crude remarks about the K-pop star Soa-cha hanging in the air. Their attention was stolen when they spotted her brother walking past, and they immediately called out to him. One of the bullies closed the distance, viciously grabbing the boy by his hair and mockingly demanding he get an autograph from his sister. As the sharp pain flared, a cold fear gripped the brother. A fear not for himself, but that his own wretched status as a bullied lowlife would somehow bring harm to his sister's shining career. The thought was violently interrupted by a fist connecting with his face, knocking him hard to the ground. His assailants, finished with their sport, simply walked away to smoke, leaving him in a heap on the pavement. His presence did not go unnoticed. 2 female students caught sight of Ijin Yu, their whispers carrying remarks on how handsome he was and why they had never seen him before. Emboldened, one of them approached and asked what year he was in. Ijin revealed he was a year their senior but confessed he didn't attend their school. A statement that caused immediate confusion, given he wore their exact uniform. He offered a vague explanation, stating he was just here for a bit, while his internal thoughts affirmed the truth of his mission. He was infiltrating the school in disguise for the day, with an expression already etched in stress. The brother of Soa-cha answered the phone, confirming he was on his way. He explained that a necessary stop at a convenience store to buy more burgers had caused the delay. The moment the call ended, however, any semblance of composure vanished. He walked on, clutching a bag of food as his face fell into a mask of utter dejection and despair. A bitter internal monologue began to play, his own hunger a sharp pang as he silently questioned how much longer he had to endure this existence as a mere meal shuttle for others. As Soa's brother drifted through the school hallway, his mind was a storm of conflict, weighing the impulse to quit against the certain distress it would inflict upon his parents and sister, just a few feet away. This quiet turmoil was contrasted by a more boisterous one, as a student began to tease his friend, Jin, for staring at a nearby girl. The comment did not go unheard. The female student in question overheard the accusation and angrily confronted the 2 boys. A flustered Jin immediately denied looking at her, his denial only serving to spark a brief, heated argument that erupted between the 3 of them. Down a school hallway, a group of male students walked, their conversation a crude dissection of the celebrity Soa-cha's body and fame. Her brother, who was unfortunately nearby, overheard their lewd comments and grew internally distressed. The students soon spotted him, confronting him with a sneering nickname, Shuttle, and an immediate demand for money. The lead bully wasted no time, grabbing the boy by the collar and threatening a beating if he came up empty-handed. A violent kick suddenly slammed into the brother's stomach, sending him flying back into the unforgiving wall. Yet, as the assault began, his fear was not for himself. His mind raced with the terrifying thought that his secret life as a low-life shuttle would be discovered, a revelation that could destroy his famous sister's reputation. Ijin Yu silently surveyed the classroom, his gaze sweeping across the unfamiliar territory. He watched as a group of female students huddled together, excitedly gossiping while looking at a picture of Soa-cha on a phone. After a moment of quiet observation, a flicker of understanding crossed his features as he began to grasp the social currents of the school. His attention was then pulled toward a different group, this one composed of male students, where one of them made a crude remark on the famous actress's attractiveness. The air soured with derogatory remarks as a group of male students spoke of the actress Soa-cha, crudely speculating that she was promiscuous and easy. Her brother, standing within earshot, overheard their venomous conversation. A visible rage contorted his features as he suddenly lunged forward, his hand shooting out to grab one of the students by the shirt collar. He aggressively confronted the startled boy, his voice low and threatening as he demanded he repeat exactly what had just been said. A cold dread churned in Soa-cha's brother as he walked through the school hallway, tormented by the thought that his humiliating existence as a bullied shuttle would inevitably tarnish his sister's pristine reputation. His anxiety spiked when he spotted his tormentors ahead, leering at photos of Soa-cha and making crude remarks. They confronted him, and their leader, enraged that he was seemingly being ignored, violently grabbed him by the collar. A brutal punch connected with his face, the impact sending him crashing to the floor, sprawled on the cold linoleum. The physical pain was nothing compared to the all-consuming fear that finished his earlier thought. The terror that people would discover his shameful secret and talk A look of pure shock overtook Soa Cha's brother as a frantic question echoed through the silence of his mind. What do you mean? The horrifying realization crashed down upon him in a cold wave of dread. He knows. He knows that I'm Soa Cha's brother. As his personal world crumbled, a relentless tide of public commentary swirled in the background, with anonymous voices flooding the digital space to criticize his sister's acting talent and speculate maliciously about her wealthy family. A bully splashed a drink directly into the young man's face. Through the stinging humiliation, his thoughts immediately turned to his famous sister, Soa Cha. A chilling dread washed over him as he worried that if the world were to discover her brother was a bullied, low-life shuttle, it would only serve to make things worse for her career. With his voice heavy, Ijin Yu confessed to an unseen listener, revealing he allowed himself to be a shuttle for one reason: to protect his sister, Soa Cha. He elaborated on the harsh reality of their world, explaining that celebrities and their families were subjected to intense public scrutiny. Any scandal, he reasoned, would bring needless trouble down upon her, no matter how innocent he truly was. Unbeknownst to him, his words did not fall on deaf ears. Nearby, Soa Cha and her friend had heard everything, and a look of pure horror washed over Soa's face as she finally learned the terrible secret her brother had been keeping for her sake. A heavy resolve settled within Ijin Yu as his mind replayed the reason for his silent endurance. If he fought back, the attention would expose his relationship with his famous sister, Soa Cha, and irrevocably damage her career. An unseen companion's voice cut through his thoughts, asking what his plan was to deal with the situation. Ijin Yu offered no response, his gaze dropping to the floor in a silent admission of his own helplessness. His quiet moment was shattered as his phone buzzed. A seemingly normal message appeared on the screen, but it was quickly buried under a barrage of increasingly hostile texts from his bullies, who knew he was in the nurse's office and aggressively demanded he meet them. From within the stark confines of a bathroom stall, a bruised Ijin Yu quietly resigned himself to his fate, resolving to endure his torment until graduation. Just outside the door, his sister, Soa Cha, and her friend stood frozen, having overheard the hushed confession. The friend turned, a look of disbelief confirming they had both heard the same terrible truth. A violent tremor seized Soa's hand, her fingers clenching her phone with crushing force as the horrific realization washed over her. She finally broke, silent tears of pure anguish and incandescent fury carving trails down her face. The awful truth finally clicked into place, as Soa connected the bullying she had just learned of to her brother Ijin Yu's recent cold distance. A bitter regret washed over her as she recalled her own foolish assumptions. How she had brushed it all off as an awkward age, or, even worse, had believed he'd simply started to dislike her. The crushing weight of his secret suffering descended upon her then, an unbearable burden of guilt and profound sadness. Her composure finally fractured as a single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Completely overwhelmed by the revelation, Soa broke down, her shoulders trembling as she began to cry in utter silence. As Ijin Yu's thoughts lingered on his sister, Soa, he considered how friendly and easy to talk to she was. A genuinely nice person. Elsewhere, however, within the confines of an alley, a group of bullies was lying in wait. One of them broke the tense silence, complaining about his hunger and questioning when their target was going to arrive. Another impatiently demanded their quarry hurry up, his words adding a sharp edge to the menacing atmosphere. A cruel pack of bullies, led by a brash young boxer, strode through the school halls, their voices echoing with vile boasts of having knocked Ijin Yu out and their gleeful plans to do it again. Just around the corner, hidden from their sight, Soa Cha and her friend listened, frozen in place. Soa's expression, once merely surprised, contorted with a dawning horror as the casual cruelty of their words painted a secret, brutal picture of the torment her brother had been enduring. Suddenly, their arrogant march was brought to an abrupt halt as Ijin Yu appeared, standing silently in their path. The lead bully stepped forward, aggressively demanding to know what he wanted and escalating the suffocating tension in the corridor. Amidst the sprawled forms of the defeated bullies, a sharp, insistent ringing suddenly cut through the tense quiet. A phone, cast aside on the ground, lit up, its screen glowing with the caller ID, "My sister." A wave of panic washed over Jinwoo, and he lunged for the device, desperate to answer. Yet, before his fingers could make contact, Ijin Yu's foot descended with deliberate, crushing force. The screen spider webbed into 1,000 pieces, abruptly silencing the call. Ijin then looked down at the utterly shocked Jinwoo, having neutralized not just the immediate physical threat, but the looming social complication as well. With a ferocious lunge, the boxer bully threw a powerful punch directly at Ijin Yu. In a display of superior calm, Ijin simply leaned back, the incoming fist slicing harmlessly through the air where his head had been a moment before. Before his opponent could recover, Ijin seized the outstretched arm and twisted it, immobilizing him instantly. He followed with a swift, powerful kick to the bully's side. The sheer force of the blow sent the boy flying, knocking him completely out of the fight as his shocked friends could only stare on in disbelief. The boxer bully confronted Ijin, his voice dripping with arrogance as he demanded a fight without gloves or rules. He taunted the silent boy, acknowledging his skill but warning him that he had messed with the wrong dude. In a flash, Ijin responded not with words, but with a single, swift finger jab that struck his opponent's throat with pinpoint precision. The bully's threats caught in his windpipe as he immediately began to choke, his hands flying to his neck in a desperate, pained reflex. His bravado shattered, the larger boy collapsed to the ground, completely incapacitated and defeated by the one unexpected strike. Without hesitation, Ijin Yu's intervention began with a sharp kick to the face of one of the bullies. He moved in a fluid sequence from there, felling 3 more with a flurry of precise and incapacitating strikes. The boxer of the group, shocked by the sudden turn of events, turned and threw a punch directly at Ijin, who dodged the attack with ease. In a seamless counter, Ijin seized the bully's extended arm, twisted it behind his back, and completely disabled him. In the aftermath, the defeated aggressors were left in a state of profound shock, wondering where such a formidable opponent could have possibly come from. Huddled together in the confines of a bathroom stall, So-a and her friend listened as the voices of other students drifted in. The conversation turned to her brother, Jinwoo, and a brutal truth was revealed. He was being beaten up every single day by a group led by someone named Yongsik. The gossip continued, explaining that Jinwoo deliberately refused to fight back, worried that any trouble he got into would tarnish the public image of his celebrity sister. As So-a's friend reacted with audible shock and dismay, So-a herself remained perfectly still. She processed the cruel words in a stunned silence, her expression slowly transforming into one of deep, agonizing pain as she realized the terrible secret her brother had been shouldering all alone. Purely for her sake. As the lead bully threw a punch directly at Ijin Yu, the attack was met not with a block, but with an unnerving calm. Ijin caught the incoming fist with a single hand, the aggressor's confidence shattering into pure shock. Effortlessly overpowering his opponent, Ijin twisted the captured arm, forcing a grimace of visible pain onto the boy's face. The counter was immediate and absolute. A single, powerful kick connected with the bully's head, knocking him unconscious before he even hit the ground. The remaining bullies could only look on in stunned terror, frozen by the swift and decisive defeat of their leader. Standing frozen in the school hallway, So-a and her friend listened with wide-eyed shock to the students buzzing about a recent fight. The story that unfolded was unbelievable. The group of bullies who had tormented her brother had been thoroughly beaten by a single person. The final detail, however, was what made her blood run cold. The lone fighter, they specified, was from Class 1. The information struck So-a with the force of a physical blow, her initial shock twisting into horrified recognition as she connected the impossible feat to someone she knew. In the oppressive shadows of an alley, a group of thugs viciously pummeled a helpless victim to the ground. One of the assailants grabbed the battered figure by the hair, yanking their head back while demanding that they speak. Just then, Ijin Yu materialized from the darkness, his hand shooting out to clamp down on the lead thug's wrist, instantly halting the assault. The other attackers froze, their faces a mask of surprise as they were met with Ijin's calm yet intensely unwavering confrontation. In the dim light of a back alley, a group of thugs stood over their beaten and terrified victim, their cruel work interrupted only by the sudden arrival of Ijin Yu. He confronted them, a single figure against many. The attackers, entirely unimpressed by the lone individual, hurled threats before deciding to swarm him. Their aggression, however, was met with overwhelming speed. In a devastating blur of motion, Ijin instantly neutralized every last one of the thugs, ending the assault as quickly as it had turned upon him. In the aftermath of the altercation, the thugs Ijin had just dispatched were left utterly baffled, questioning the identity of the boy who had so swiftly vanished, now walking alongside his friends. Ijin internally wished for the remainder of the day to be peaceful and free from any further conflict. His hope was immediately crushed. However, when one of his companions pointed ahead towards a large crowd of students gathered right outside their classroom, Ijin and his friends stopped dead in their tracks, staring at the unexplained commotion that awaited them. Amidst the humiliating whispers of the onlooking students, the defeated bully leader angrily staggered back to his feet. The final straw was a taunt from a nearby boy, who called him pathetic for his loss. Enraged by the insult, the bully lunged to attack the student, but his advance was stopped in an instant. Ijin Yu had intervened, his hand gripping the bully's wrist with unyielding force. An intense glare, cold and sharp, locked onto the aggressor as Ijin warned him not to lay a hand on the other boy. A wave of pure terror washed over the bully's face. Paralyzed by Ijin's overwhelming aura, he immediately submitted to the command. In the still aftermath of the confrontation, Ijin Yu stood calmly over the bodies of the defeated bullies. A crowd of students had gathered, their faces etched with shock and disbelief as they processed the impossible truth that he had overcome the entire group by himself. From the defeated heap, the leader struggled to his feet. Bruised but defiant, he angrily confronted Ijin, his voice cutting through the stunned silence as he demanded to know who he was and why he had attacked them. Staring down at his defeated opponent, Ijin Yu delivered a stark warning never to bully anyone again. He then turned and walked away, his final words hanging in the air as a chilling promise. If he had to come back, things won't end this nicely. Left stunned on the ground, the bully leader could only watch him go, his mind reeling as he questioned the mysterious youth's motives and wondered if this had all been to avenge some past victim. From his position on the ground, the bully leader mocked Ijin's intimidating posture, his voice dripping with a refusal to back down from the confrontation. The taunt, however, was cut short, before the boy could finish his defiant words. Ijin's hand shot out, grabbing him by the head. With brutal finality, he forcefully slammed the bully's face into the concrete wall. The youth immediately slumped to the ground, a bloodied and incapacitated heap. Fueled by a potent mix of rage and humiliation, the defeated bully leader scrambled back to his feet. He lunged at Ijin from behind, hoping to land a desperate surprise attack on his unsuspecting target. Yet, without so much as a backward glance, Ijin calmly raised a hand and caught the incoming fist, stopping the assault instantly. He then turned, leveling a chilling glare at his attacker. The bully's anger immediately vanished, replaced by a wave of visible terror. Completely overwhelmed and intimidated, the young man could do nothing more than fall to his knees in utter defeat. Humbled and defeated, the school's bully leader submitted to Ijin Yu with a promise that he won't mess with anyone. The fragile peace was immediately broken. However, when a student from the onlooking crowd pointed and laughed at the vanquished fighter, enraged by the sudden taunt, the bully lunged from the ground to assault the mocking student. In a blur of motion, Ijin Yu was already between them, effortlessly blocking the attack to shield the very person who had provoked it. A murmur of disbelief and awe spread through the onlooking students, who could scarcely process that Ijin had just defeated the school's most notorious bullies. One student, emboldened by the power shift, stepped forward to confront the fallen bully leader, taunting him for only acting tough when he was the strongest one around. Pure rage twisted the bully's face as he lunged, grabbing the taunting student by the collar and snarling a threat. Yet, before his fist could connect, a hand shot out and clamped down firmly on his wrist, halting the attack in an instant. It was Ijin, who now stood calmly between the aggressor and his would-be victim, effortlessly restraining the fuming bully. As an unnamed student began to taunt the defeated and bruised bully leader, the boy's humiliation turned to fury. He surged to his feet and lunged at the student, fist cocked back to strike. In a blur, Ijin Yu stepped between them, catching the incoming punch effortlessly in a single hand. With chilling calm, Ijin uttered a simple command. Stop. Then, his grip tightened, crushing the bones in the bully's hand and drawing a raw scream of agony that instantly ended the renewed threat. Enraged by a student's taunts, the bully leader surged to his feet, intent on retaliation. But in an instant, Ijin Yu moved between them, physically blocking the aggressor's path to protect his classmate. Did you think I was joking? The bully snarled, closing in on Ijin. In response, Ijin offered only a silent, cold, and intensely intimidating gaze. The bully's rage evaporated, replaced by a visceral terror that made him recoil as sweat beaded on his brow. With the threat utterly neutralized by nothing more than an expression, Ijin turned and walked away, leaving the defeated bully completely shaken. A murmur of shock and awe rippled through the onlooking students as Ijin Yu, having single-handedly dispatched the bullies, began to walk away. The defeated leader, however, staggered back to his feet and angrily shouted for him to stop. Emboldened by the outcome, a student from the crowd taunted the aggressor, reminding him that he had already lost. Enraged by the jeer, the bully leader lunged toward the boy, but Ijin instantly intervened. His hand shot out, grabbing the leader's arm and halting the assault completely. Now standing as a shield between the two, Ijin leveled a cold, downward stare that rooted the bully in place, uttering a single, final command. Don't. In the school hallway, Ijin Yu answered a phone call as the aftermath of his fight settled around him. Behind his still form, the unnamed bully leader and his associates lay defeated on the floor, their humiliation witnessed by a crowd of onlooking students. With a chilling calm that defied the violence he had just dispensed, Ijin reported the event to the caller, casually dismissing the entire brutal confrontation as merely a minor issue. The air buzzed with rumor as a group of male students discussed a recent fight, their voices a mix of awe and disbelief. They recounted how Yongsik and his friends had all been hospitalized, taken down by a single, mysterious individual, convinced the fighter couldn't possibly attend their school since no one had been able to find him. They marveled at the sheer power required for one person to defeat an entire group. Unseen by the gossiping students, Ijin Yu had been listening to their entire conversation. He calmly walked over to their table and placed some money down, informing one of the boys it was to repay him for kimbap he had eaten earlier. Without another word, Ijin turned and walked away, leaving the students staring after him in utter confusion. As Ijin Yu stood in the school hallway, a hand suddenly seized his shoulder from behind. He turned to find his sister, Dayun, her face a mask of frustration as she angrily demanded to know why he was ignoring her texts. Startled by her sudden appearance, Ijin asked what she was even doing at his school. She explained that she had no choice but to come, since he wasn't responding to any of her calls or messages. With a sharp hint of impatience, she then ordered him to grab his bag so they could leave together. Surrounded by other students, a girl found herself on the ground, her face a mask of shock and fear as she stared upward. Looming over her was Dayun Yu, whose intense gaze burned with pure accusation. From a short distance, Ijin himself watched the confrontation unfold. Dayun's voice cut through the tense air, calling out the fallen student for her clever method of bullying his brother. How she had manipulated boys to do all of her dirty work for her. With her objective clear, Dayun Yu stood before the female bully and declared that everyone now knew what she had done. A quiet ripple of confirmation spread through the surrounding students as they stared down at their phones, the truth of Dayun's claim displayed for all to see, leaving her adversary stunned and speechless. Dayun turned and walked away, only to be met by her brother, Ijin Yu, who had watched the entire confrontation unfold. He immediately questioned her methods, his voice tinged with concern that by exposing the girl so publicly, she had only invited bad rumors to spread about herself. Ijin Yu explained to Dayun that he had been bullied at school, following the confession with his concern that if this information became public, it would negatively affect her image. Dayun passionately refuted his logic, insisting that he had done nothing wrong. With a flare of anger, she declared that the bullies were the ones doing something bad, not him. Cutting the other student off mid-sentence, Dayun Yu coolly stated that she didn't care if the bully's feelings were hurt by the repercussions. of her own actions. She then advised the girl not to worry about such things anymore. In a swift, aggressive motion, Dayan's hand shot out, grabbing the bully by the collar and yanking her in close. With a menacing glare that promised violence, she finished her thought, warning the girl to stay far away from her brother. A final, contemptuous shove sent the bully stumbling backward, leaving her utterly speechless and terrified as Dayan turned and walked away without another word. Amidst the tense aftermath of the bullying, Ijin Yu aggressively confronted the female student who had orchestrated the entire setup, her hand shooting out to grab the girl by the collar. Elsewhere in the hallway, two male students were absorbed in a much more trivial matter, casually discussing whether to ask a girl to play video games with them. This brief moment of normalcy was pierced by a serious phone call. As Ijin's colleague, Major Kang, revealed that he knew about Ijin's recent security detail for Soa-cha in America. The revelation hung in the air, with all attention drawing to Ijin as he stood listening intently to the voice on the other end of the line. The executive began the conversation with Soa-cha by casually mentioning her recent business trip to the United States. His tone shifted, becoming patronizing as he asked if she was finding it difficult to learn her new responsibilities. Before she could answer, he revealed that he knew she had acquired a so-called boyfriend during her time there. He then announced that this same young man would be visiting Korea soon, concluding with the unambiguous directive that Soa herself had been tasked with showing the visitor around for the duration of his stay. The executive strode into the room, his presence immediately interrupting the conversation between Soa-cha and two male students. He addressed Soa directly, informing her that someone she had met in America was on their way to visit her in Korea. The man then designated this visitor as her boyfriend, coldly stating that she was required to show him around the city. A wave of displeasure and stress washed over Soa's face at the unwelcome news. Seeking to speak with her further, the executive dismissed her classmates for a private moment. As the two students filed out of the room, they left a visibly troubled Soa to face the executive alone. With the school day ending, Soa-cha approached Ijin Yu, asking if he was free. She continued without pause, explaining that she was already aware of his plans to go grocery shopping with his sister, Dayan. With his intentions laid bare, she then voiced her own request, asking if she could come along with them. Amidst a brief lull, a colleague approached Ijin Yu to ask about his recent assignment guarding Soa-cha. The man was curious if Ijin had spotted any other celebrities, but Ijin merely stated that the job had not been a long one. With that, his colleague speculated it was unlikely he would be assigned to Soa's detail again. Later, the professional environment gave way to the bright aisles of a grocery store, where Ijin shopped with his sister, Dayan, and her friend, Yuna. Noticing Yuna's hesitation, Dayan warmly reassured her not to feel like she was imposing, explaining that she herself had been the one to invite her along. Dayan then added that her brother could have easily handled the shopping alone, making it abundantly clear that Yuna was a welcome guest. As Yuna watched the effortless interaction between Ijin and his sister, she found herself silently remarking on their tight-knit bond, a quiet envy for such closeness stirring within her. Her thoughtful gaze was not missed. Dayan turned her attention directly to Yuna and, without a moment's hesitation, invited her to their home for dinner if she wasn't busy. To sweeten the spontaneous offer, she added that Ijin was a good cook, playfully suggesting they could ask him to prepare the meal for them. Amidst the aisles, the simple task of grocery shopping came to an abrupt halt. Ijin had paused, his attention completely captured by the screen of his phone and thoroughly distracted from their errand. Clutching the shopping basket, Dayan's patience wore thin as she finally expressed her annoyance, accusing him of ignoring her completely. Nearby, Yuna simply observed the familiar sibling interaction, a quiet, amused smile playing on her lips. With practiced ease, Ijin Yu prepared a meal, tending to the simmering pot before serving the finished dish into bowls for his family. He, his sister Dayan, and their grandfather then sat together to share the food he had made. Dayan's delight was immediate, and she couldn't help but boast about her brother's incredible cooking skills to their grandfather. Filled with admiration, she turned to Ijin and asked him directly where he had ever learned to cook so well. At home, Ijin Yu presented a meal he had just finished cooking. explaining to his family that he learned the recipe from a MeTube video. His sister, Da-yun, praised his skill and warmly insisted on doing the dishes herself, a reflection of their close bond. This domestic peace soon gave way to the professional atmosphere of the SW Group headquarters, where a security leader gathered Team 3 for a briefing on a new assignment. He announced their mission was to provide security for Miss Yeona and a visiting VIP from the Bailey Group. Within this operation, Ijin and his colleague, So-yu, were given their specific orders. They were to personally escort Miss Yeona. With the meal concluded, Ijin Yu reached for his bowl to clear it from the table. But his sister, Da-yun, promptly stopped him. She insisted that he stay put, declaring that she would handle the dishes herself. With an enthusiastic spirit, Da-yun began gathering the tableware to be washed. Ijin simply watched his younger sister, a soft and quiet expression of pure contentment settling upon his features. Having been thoroughly briefed on their assignment to escort Miss Yeona, Ijin Yu and his colleague So-yu stood by. Inside the tense meeting, the heir of the Bailey Group pressured Yeona to agree to an engagement, condescendingly framing it as the necessary solution for her company's problems as she sat caught in an uncomfortable silence. Ijin determined it was time to intervene. He entered the room with professional composure, offering a formal apology for the interruption before addressing Yeona directly. With calm authority, he informed her that it was time for her next scheduled appointment, thus providing the perfect pretext for her escape. As they proceeded down the hallway, Yeona's voice cut through the quiet, asking if the heightened security was a result of the recent incident. Ijin confirmed it was a direct order from the chairman, a measure taken to ensure her safety. Her focus, however, suddenly shifted from herself to him as she asked if he was okay. He quickly reassured her that he was fine, prompting a visible wave of relief to wash over her features. She expressed her gladness that he was unharmed, and Ijin fell silent, observing her expression. He was completely taken aback, utterly unprepared for the genuine concern she held not for herself, but for his own well-being. A security leader summoned Team 3 for a briefing on a visitor of great importance. The VIP was revealed to be the third child of the formidable Bailey Group, arriving with the express purpose of strengthening corporate relations. Because Miss Yeona herself would be hosting the heir, the critical duty of the visitor's security was assigned to Team 3. Within this elite unit, Ijin Yu and So-yu were given the specific, high-responsibility task of escorting Miss Yeona throughout the engagement. As the briefing concluded, the immense weight of the mission seemed to settle squarely on Ijin, cementing his central role in the assignment to come. Without warning, the hand of the Bailey Group heir shot across the table, seizing Yeona's own. A jolt of shock coursed through her, her internal distress mounting at the humiliation of this happening directly in front of Ijin. From their positions, both Ijin and So-yu observed the unwelcome advance, their expressions unreadable masks of stoicism. The heir, noticing her alarm, questioned her reaction with a condescending sneer, callously reminding her that her bodyguards were merely paid to ignore the personal affairs of their clients. Outside the doors of a private meeting room, security members Ijin Yu and So-yu stood vigilant guard. Within, the heir of the Bailey Group initiated his conversation with Yeona, asking if she had considered his offer. With a smug air, he elaborated on his proposal of engagement, condescendingly framing it as an opportunity by stating that being his fiancée would be a pretty good position for her. Outside the meeting room, Ijin Yu and his colleague, So-yu, stood in professional stillness. From within, the condescending voice of the Bailey Group heir cut through the silence, questioning Yeona about why he had to come in person for her answer and accusing her of avoiding the subject. Yeona replied that she had, in fact, already given him her answer. The heir immediately dismissed her prior rejection, demanding that she reconsider it one more time. At his post by the door, Ijin remained motionless, having clearly overheard every word of the coercive exchange. With calculated cruelty, the heir to the Bailey Group launched his verbal assault. He began by asserting that Yeona held no true position or influence at SW Corp, a ghost in her own company. While he acknowledged the significant stake she inherited from her father, he immediately dismissed its value, rendering her trivial compared to other family members. His condescension deepened as he claimed there were those within her own corporation who would prefer she simply sit pretty, a decorative piece stripped of any real responsibility. Yeona absorbed each demeaning assessment in silence, her expression tightening as his venomous words settled within her. A calm voice suddenly announced that it was time to leave for the next location, decisively cutting through the tense atmosphere between Yeona and the Bailey Group heir. The heir reacted with visible annoyance at the interruption, while a quiet wave of relief washed over Yeona. Ijin then stepped into the room, positioning himself near his client. He formally restated that they must depart immediately to maintain her schedule, his professional declaration bringing the strained meeting to an undeniable close. As the heir to the Bailey Group pressed a visibly uncomfortable Yeona for an answer concerning an engagement, Ijin Yu observed the tense exchange. He stepped forward, smoothly and politely interrupting their conversation. With professional poise, Ijin stated that it was time for Miss Yeona's next scheduled appointment, providing a clear reason for their departure. Angered by the intrusion, the heir whirled on the newcomer, his voice dripping with condescension as he demanded to know who he was. Unfazed, Ijin calmly identified himself as Yeona's security, a revelation that left the arrogant young man visibly surprised. As tension flared, Luwen aggressively confronted Ijin, accusing the bodyguard of brazenly overstepping his authority. Before the accusation could escalate, Yeona Sin decisively moved, physically placing herself between the two men to intervene. She immediately defended Ijin, taking full ownership of his prior actions by claiming that she had simply instructed him to remind her of something. Solidifying their united front, Ijin calmly reinforced his position, stating that his primary responsibility was, and always had been, to escort her without any setbacks. With his intent masked by a calm demeanor, Luwen requested a private conversation with Yeona. He subtly challenged her, suggesting that it was she, not he, who was made uncomfortable by the constant presence of her bodyguards. A brief, tense pause hung in the air before Yeona asserted her own authority, assuring her security team that she was fine and ordering them to give the two of them the room. The dismissed team, Ijin among them, could only look on as they left their principal isolated with a potential antagonist. With his aggressive tirade concluded, Luwen extended his challenge to the entire SW security team. The provocation, however, earned no reaction from Ijin Yu, who stood perfectly stoic and unfazed, misreading the bodyguard's profound calm entirely. Luwen then turned on Yeona, loudly accusing her of rejecting his marriage proposal because she was romantically involved with Ijin. The outrageous public declaration left Yeona utterly shocked and speechless. With a dismissive air, Luwen informed Yeona that she could continue seeing her boyfriend even after they were engaged, making it clear their marriage would not be for love. Utterly unimpressed by his condescension, Yeona stated that she was tired and simply not in the mood to continue their discussion. She unilaterally postponed the meeting until the next day and began to walk away, leaving him standing alone. As she departed, Luwen's voice called after her, demanding she give him an answer to his proposal before he had to leave the country. As Yeona Sin and Ijin Yu made their way through the corporate building, their path was suddenly blocked by an older female SW executive. The woman stopped them, her expression hardening into a stern and confrontational mask as her gaze fixed solely on Yeona. Without preamble, the executive verbally accosted the young woman, sharply accusing her of being unable to fulfill her scheduled tasks for the day. The SW executive's sharp voice berated Yeona Sin for a failed escort. The failure made all the more significant as it involved Luwen, a key business partner. Yeona attempted to defend her actions, stating that it was Luwen himself who had cancelled their arrangement. The professional grievance, however, quickly curdled into a venomous personal attack. The executive's composure shattered as she declared that out of everyone in their family, it was Yeona she could not stand the most faced with such naked animosity. Yeona remained calm, simply acknowledging the woman's hatred as something she was already well aware of. The SW executive began her tirade by recounting her own difficult history, describing the constant struggle and battle she had endured against her own father and brother to secure her position. With a voice laced in venom, she directly accused Yeona of having done absolutely nothing to earn her inheritance. Yona's high standing, she claimed, was solely due to their grandfather's pity and special protection, a favor granted only because she had been orphaned at a young age. A deep resentment burned in her words as she noted that the very grandfather who coddled Yona was the same man who forced the rest of the family to claw at each other's throats as a twisted form of corporate training. If things continued on this path, the executive concluded, it would be Yona who would inevitably inherit the entire corporation, the true and bitter source of her animosity. In the aftermath of a brazen public confrontation where an SW executive openly questioned Yona's qualifications and demanded her accountability, the repercussions rippled outward. Luan's aide later presented him with a background file on Ijin Yu. Its contents disappointingly mundane. Only the boy's age, his connection to Yona, and his status as a simple intern on the security team were listed. A flicker of disbelief crossed Luan's face as he reviewed the simplistic report, prompting him to ask if his aide had even investigated the correct person. The aide insisted the findings were correct, admitting only that the research had been rushed. The executive's mind reeled, questioning Yona's judgment and wondering how she could have been naive enough to bring Ijin to such a significant event. Her contempt quickly escalated, her thoughts sharpening into a damning conclusion. The girl was even more worthless than she had imagined. Her gaze then shifted, fixing on Ijin from a distance, and she admitted to herself that the mere sight of him was an aggravation. It was then she understood with bitter clarity. Yona's motivation was not foolishness but malice. A calculated and spiteful act to keep him on her detail precisely because he provoked others. With their official meetings concluded, a sudden detour was announced to a place Yona wished to visit. The female SW executive, accompanied by her aide, soon found herself arriving at an SW security training facility. It was there the aide explained the abrupt change in their itinerary. He, Luan, had requested to watch the training session, forcing their hand. A shadow of doubt crossed the executive's features as she processed the information, her mind racing to decipher what Luan could possibly be trying to accomplish with such an unscheduled visit. Following the demand that he retract his statement, Luan openly voiced his disdain for Yona's security detail, pointing out that both bodyguards were only teenagers and one was merely an intern. He then directly insulted the competence of the entire SW security division, accusing Yona of adding Ijin to her detail on a personal whim. At that moment, the SW security manager stepped forward to intervene. He calmly refuted Luan's claims, asserting that SW security did not operate in such an unprofessional manner. The manager went on to personally attest to the exceptional skills and sound character of his security team, explicitly including the two young men assigned to Yona. As the manager delivered his defense, Luan could only listen, his face twisting into a look of clear annoyance. In the lingering aftermath of their confrontation, Luan formally proposed a contest to resolve the palpable tension. He laid down the gauntlet, pitting his own security detail directly against the fine men of SW security, his challenge aimed squarely at Ijin and his manager. The declaration hung in the air, culminating in a silent standoff as Luan and his guards faced Ijin and the SW security manager. The terms of their impending conflict now irrevocably set. The antagonistic man provoked Ms. Yona, his words dripping with sarcasm as he suggested she must vouch for her security team's skills. Yet, she responded with unshaken calm, stating that judging her team was not her decision to make. With a quiet but firm resolve, she then clarified that her guards were there for one reason alone: to protect her, not to provide entertainment, a declaration that effectively shut down his taunt. As the first opponent rushed forward, throwing a powerful right-handed punch, Ijin Yu calmly ducked beneath the blow, evading the attack with contemptuous ease. In a single, fluid motion, he pivoted and delivered a sharp chop to the back of his assailant's neck. The man collapsed instantly, knocked unconscious from the solitary strike. Ijin's colleagues could only stare in utter disbelief at the sudden, decisive victory. Standing over the fallen form, Ijin turned his gaze toward the other challengers and spoke a single, chilling word: next. With a sneer, the man directed his contempt squarely at Ijin, branding him a shameless trainee for hiding behind the client and refusing to fight. His verbal assault then broadened, sweeping across the entire SW security team as he questioned their very honor, accusing them of using their duty as a pathetic excuse to avoid a spar. The provocation landed exactly as intended, for the hot-headed guard could no longer contain his anger, his readiness to fight back flaring in response to the relentless goading. The SW security spokesperson professionally explained that his team could not spar, clarifying that any potential injuries would compromise their sworn duty to protect Ms. Yeona. This valid concern was promptly dismissed by the antagonist, who instead proposed that the newly joined Team 2 could participate in the match. With a condescending smirk firmly in place, he then formally issued the challenge directly to them, his words a public slight designed to question their very capability. The antagonistic man's mocking voice persisted, accusing the team of hiding behind their female client. In the silence that followed, the focus shifted to a determined Ijin Yu. Ms. Yeona leaned in, quietly assuring him that he didn't have to fight. But Ijin's resolve was clear. He firmly stated his intention to participate, declaring his identity as a member of Team 2. With a sudden lunge, the first opponent rushed forward to attack, but Ijin easily sidestepped the clumsy advance. As the man stumbled past, thrown completely off balance, Ijin found himself perfectly positioned behind his foe. He delivered a single, swift hand chop to the back of the man's neck. The challenger was immediately knocked unconscious, collapsing to the ground as Ijin stood over the fallen figure, entirely unfazed. A female colleague watched on, her thoughts a tangled mess of concern. She had privately asked Ijin's opponent to go easy, hoping the bout would serve merely as a lesson for the boy. Despite knowing full well that Ijin was skilled, his sheer youth was a stubborn fact that fueled her anxiety. Her apprehension sent her mind spiraling back to his training sessions, recalling his startling performance. In her memory, Ijin moved through the sparring exercises with fluid grace, effortlessly evading and countering his partner's every blow. A clear demonstration of his superior reflexes and undeniable skill. As the sparring match commenced, the first opponent lunged toward Ijin, throwing a powerful right punch. Ijin easily sidestepped the attack, a simple movement that sent his larger adversary stumbling past him. Before the man could recover his footing, Ijin seized his arm and executed a swift, decisive takedown, slamming him hard onto the ground. The fight was over in an instant. The worried female colleague, who had been concerned for his safety, watched the outcome in stunned silence. A look of sheer amazement spread across her face as she realized she hadn't needed to worry about him at all. The man's challenge dripped with condescension as he called Ijin a kid, telling him to quit if he was scared. A large, muscular bodyguard then stepped forward to be the sparring partner, cracking his knuckles as a clear act of intimidation. As the fight was about to begin, a worried female colleague voiced her concern for Ijin's safety, but the moment was already in motion. The massive opponent lunged, throwing the first aggressive punch. Ijin, however, moved with calm fluidity, effortlessly dodging the attack. In a single, swift motion, he countered with a disabling strike to the man's arm before delivering a final, decisive open palm strike to his jaw. The opponent was knocked out cold, collapsing heavily to the ground as the entire crowd of onlookers stared in shocked silence at the display of overwhelming skill. With a calm voice, Ijin asked aloud if the winner was supposed to take on the next challenger. His question instantly ignited the fury of another man, whose face twisted into a deep scowl. The bodyguard felt that Ijin was arrogantly taunting him in front of everyone. In a silent, decisive motion, he shrugged off his suit jacket and stepped forward, positioning himself as the next opponent. With a burst of aggression, the first opponent charged at Ijin, throwing a heavy punch. Ijin, remaining completely calm, simply ducked under the attack, effortlessly using the man's own forward momentum against him. He executed a swift leg sweep, tripping his challenger. The opponent fell hard to the ground, defeated in an instant. A profound silence fell over the crowd as Ms. Yeona and the rival security team stared, stunned by the impossibly swift outcome. Looking down at his fallen adversary, Ijin nonchalantly called out for the next. Seething over a previous comment, the unnamed second challenger furiously confronted Ijin Yu. Unfazed by the hostility, Ijin calmly repeated his desire to end this quickly, a dismissive remark that only served to further enrage his opponent. With a shout, the challenger lunged forward, throwing an aggressive punch aimed squarely at his target. Yet, the attack met only empty air as Ijin effortlessly dodged the blow and, in a single fluid motion, landed a swift counter-strike directly into the man's torso. As the first opponent threw a right-handed punch toward Ijin Yu's head, Ijin simply ducked under the attack. He easily evaded the blow, using the momentum to close the distance between them in an instant. From his lowered stance, Ijin then drove a single, powerful strike squarely into his opponent's midsection. The man was immediately incapacitated by the impact, his face contorting in pain as he collapsed to the ground, ending the fight before it had truly begun. The head of the security detail's voice echoed with fury as he tore into his men. Their loss to a kid, he spat, was nothing short of despicable, a shameful result born of pure carelessness. Just then, his subordinate took a bold step forward, interrupting the tirade to correct his superior's harsh assessment. He conceded that their first match had indeed been lost to carelessness, but firmly clarified that the second was not. His words a heavy admission of the undeniable skill that had truly bested them. Incredulous fury had twisted the recruiter's face as he scolded his men, his voice thick with disbelief that they had been overwhelmed by a mere teenager. Back on the sparring floor, the consequence of that overwhelming power was starkly evident. Ijin Yu stood perfectly still, an unflinching center of gravity as his three opponents abandoned all aggression. They circled him cautiously, their bodies coiled in tight, defensive stances. Watching from the sidelines, Major Kang and the other SW group members analyzed the tactical shift. It was clear the elite bodyguards were no longer fighting to win, but had become deeply wary of the boy's demonstrably superior skill. After chastising his subordinate for the team's loss, a confrontation in which the man could only admit they had been thoroughly outschooled, the head of the visiting detail approached Ijin Yu. With a newfound respect, he complimented Ijin's formidable abilities and made a direct offer to recruit him, promising treatment and pay that would significantly surpass anything he received at SW Group. However, Ijin Yu rejected the proposition flatly and without a moment's hesitation, stating firmly that he had no intention of leaving his current position. The recruiter was left standing in stunned silence, momentarily speechless in the face of such a swift and decisive refusal. The recruiter approached Ijin Yu with a condescending proposition, offering a place on his team with promises of better treatment and pay, a supposed rescue from his current job. Ijin, however, flatly rejected the offer, stating he had no intention of leaving his role at SW Group. Annoyed by the swift dismissal, the recruiter abandoned his pretense, his true motive finally surfacing: to get Ijin away from his client. His voice sharpened as he delivered an explicit warning for Ijin to stay away from Yeona Sin, questioning his very suitability to be near her. In response to the blatant threat, Ijin offered only a cold, silent glare, his resolve to protect Yeona visibly hardening in his eyes. A powerful blow from Ijin Yu sent his first opponent reeling. In a single, fluid motion, his body coiled and then unleashed a devastating spinning kick that cleanly incapacitated the second adversary. Watching from the sidelines, Major Kang Hamchan's expression was one of pure admiration for the young man's formidable prowess. Ijin landed with perfect balance, standing victoriously over his two fallen opponents as the third looked on, frozen in utter shock. The stark admission came from one of the subordinate antagonists, who reported to his boss that none of their men could beat Ijin. The recruiter met this news with disbelief, pointing out that they still had men ready to fight. Nearby, an SW bodyguard observed the opposing team's lingering defiance. A man named Luwen, in particular, looked eager to continue the battle, if only to salvage their wounded pride. It was then that Major Kang Hamchan's voice cut through the tension with unwavering authority. He declared that the opposing team had no chance of beating Ijin no matter how hard they tried, and that it wouldn't matter in the slightest even if they somehow managed to win. With a confident calm, Major Kang Hamchan explained to his men why the confrontation was already over. There was simply no point in their opponents continuing the fight, he stated, not when Ijin had already defeated three of them so decisively. Their original motive had been to humiliate the young bodyguard, but the tables had been turned against him so thoroughly that they would surely give up now. surveying the aftermath of the swift takedown. A slight smile graced the major's lips as he admitted, almost to himself, that he had truly grown to admire Ijin's incredible skill. As Ijin's SW colleagues erupted in a roar of enthusiastic cheers for his victory, Major Kang Hamchan observed the camaraderie with a low chuckle. He found it amusing how well liked the young man was. Despite being a person of so few words, Kang understood that for men in their profession, Ijin's consistent and undeniable display of superior skill served as a far more powerful testament to his character than mere words could ever be. Across the room, the defeated bodyguards were left sprawled on the floor, their stern-faced boss looking on in silent fury until one of his subordinates cautiously approached him. An employee stepped into the SW chairman's office to present a report. The man informed his superior that a rookie, Ijin Yu, had managed to single-handedly defeat all three of their guests' bodyguards. Upon receiving this startling news, the chairman immediately questioned the circumstances, asking if the bodyguards had actually engaged in a match. Within the quiet confines of his office, the chairman of SW Group received a troubling report from an employee. The man explained that a visiting security team had instigated a conflict, provoking SW's own bodyguards into a sparring match after their repeated refusals were arrogantly ignored. It was Ijin's team too, the employee clarified, that had been forced to accept the challenge, as Team 3 was on active duty and could not afford any injuries. Impatient, the chairman interrupted the lengthy explanation to demand the final result. A brief silence hung in the air before the employee delivered the astonishing news. The trainee, Ijin Yu, had single-handedly defeated every single one of the opposing bodyguards. The chairman was left to silently process the immense weight of this information. With a hand extended in a gesture of recruitment, the man made his direct offer for Ijin to come work for him. He pointedly reminded Ijin of his lowly status as a mere trainee, immediately countering it with the promise of a full employee position. As an added incentive, the recruiter dangled the prospect of a much higher salary than anything the SW Group was paying. Throughout this tempting proposal, Ijin remained perfectly still and silent, his face an unreadable mask as he simply listened. Mistaking this silence for shrewd negotiation, the man assumed a more concrete financial figure was needed and prepared to elaborate on the generous terms of his offer. The head of the visiting security detail dangled a tempting offer, promising to double whatever SW Group paid if Ijin Yu would switch his allegiance. Ijin answered the proposition not with words, but with a profound and unwavering silence, an implicit rejection that hung heavy between them. Annoyed, the recruiter began to condescendingly chide the young bodyguard, mocking him for his failure to understand how the world truly worked and for foolishly passing up such a tremendous opportunity. When it became clear the boy would not be swayed, the man abandoned his recruitment efforts and shifted his focus to a stark warning. Ijin was to keep his distance from Yeona Sin. In response to the thinly veiled threat, Ijin simply stared back, his expression hardening into a serious and utterly unreadable mask. With a sneer, the recruiter warned Ijin Yu to stay away from Yeona Sin, contemptuously adding that she was not his kind of girl. Unfazed, Ijin calmly refuted the personal jab, stating that he was simply performing his professional duties as her bodyguard. Seeing his intimidation fail, the man then resorted to a cruder tactic, attempting to bribe the boy with what he assumed would be a much higher salary. Ijin, however, completely ignored the offer, declared that their discussion was over, and turned his back on the man to leave. The recruiter was left standing speechless and simmering with anger, watching as Ijin walked away without another word. The white-haired suitor vented his frustration, angrily blaming his men's failure for the disrespect Ijin Yu had been allowed to show him. His subordinate attempted to save face, dismissing the loss as nothing more than an unlucky match, while downplaying the value of hand-to-hand combat. Unconvinced, the suitor pressed the issue, questioning if Ijin was truly as skilled as the outcome suggested. Cornered, the subordinate was forced to admit the truth. His top guards had been easily and decisively defeated, a clear confirmation of Ijin's vastly superior ability. As the subordinate attempted to justify his team's defeat by downplaying the importance of hand-to-hand combat for bodyguards, the white-haired suitor cut him short. Brushing aside the excuse, he shifted the topic to a more critical matter. Inquiring if the deal was proceeding according to plan, the subordinate quickly affirmed that it was on course, further specifying that the transaction would be fully completed the following day. Just after his master had concluded his official business, the suitor inwardly gloated, certain that in just one more day, he would finally acquire his brother's weaknesses. As this thought crossed his mind, an employee from the SW group informed Ijin that his official duties for the visit had concluded. The young woman then approached the suitor, her voice taut as she asked to confirm that she still had one more day to give him her answer. He nonchalantly granted her the extension, but once she was alone, her composure crumbled. A profound anguish washed over her as she was left to dread the inexorable passage of that final, fleeting day. The suitor began by mentioning Ijin Yu, identifying him as the very bodyguard who had fought his men the previous day. He then deliberately provoked the young woman, stating with a cold certainty that he understood why she would be attracted to him. A flustered denial was her immediate response. She questioned why he would make such a baseless accusation. Ignoring her distress, her suitor simply dismissed her reaction and doubled down on his assertion, coolly insisting that he gets it. He delivered his final, manipulative blow by granting her his so-called permission to continue seeing Ijin, even after they were to be engaged and married. When the young woman questioned his true motivation for wanting to marry her, the white-haired suitor met her inquiry with cold disdain. He condescendingly dismissed her question, stating that for people like us, marriage was merely a transaction, not an act of love. He framed the proposal as a mutually beneficial deal, assuring her that their personal love lives would remain their own private business. With chilling finality, he then issued an ultimatum, demanding she provide her answer by the following day. Having laid out his terms, the suitor turned and walked away, leaving her alone to process the oppressive weight of his offer. As the car carrying the young woman drove off into the night, she was left to question if a marriage of transaction was truly the only way to protect those she cared for. Later, Ijin found himself in a different vehicle, where an SW group employee informed him that his official duties for the day were complete. He exited the car and began a solitary walk through the city. His quiet journey was cut short, however, when his attention was suddenly snared by activity in a secluded area nearby. There, he observed the suitor's subordinate from Bailey Security shaking hands with an informant as they exchanged a briefcase, revealing a secret deal unfolding in the shadows. With a word of thanks from the SW group employee, Ijin's business for the day was concluded. He stepped out of the car onto the street, the night deep around him. As he began to walk away, his attention was suddenly snared by the sight of two men meeting secretively in a nearby alley. Instantly, Ijin stopped, concealing himself in the darkness to observe the clandestine exchange from a distance. With his official business for the day concluded, Ijin Yu requested to be dropped off for a personal errand. After the SW group employee agreed, Ijin exited the vehicle and proceeded alone down a dark, rain-slicked alley. He soon came to a halt, his attention suddenly captured by an event unfolding further down the narrow passage. From the concealment of the shadows, Ijin watched as two unidentified figures conducted a secretive exchange, his gaze fixed upon the small object that passed from one hand to the other. From a safe distance, Ijin Yu watched the clandestine meeting unfold within the confines of a secluded alley. There, the suitor's subordinate met with a shadowy informant, who promptly presented a small data chip. The subordinate took the device, his hand closing around the very information needed to bring the suitor's brother to ruin. Having fulfilled his side of the deal, the informant then broke the silence, demanding to know when he would receive his promised payment. With the informant's assurance that payment would be wired upon verification, the subordinate finalized the data download. He snapped the laptop shut, concluding their deal. As the informant began to walk away, a sudden presence materialized behind the subordinate, causing him to flinch. He spun around, his blood running cold as he found himself cornered and completely surrounded by a gang of armed ambushers who had appeared as if from nowhere. The dust of the ambush settled, leaving only a profound stillness. Ijin Yu stood as the sole victor, an unmoving silhouette surrounded by the unconscious bodies of his would-be assassins. From the ground, the suitor's subordinate watched the aftermath unfold, his shock curdling into a cold, Frantic terror. His mind raced with a terrible, mistaken conclusion. Could the suitor's own brother have known about the deal and sent these men? Ijin's gaze then drifted down to the trembling man. A silent, heavy stare that made the subordinate's palpable fear spike into pure dread. Ignoring the man's paralysis, Ijin calmly bent and retrieved the briefcase, securing the very prize that had prompted the violent, clandestine exchange. Surrounded at gunpoint, Ijin Yu remained perfectly calm as he faced the team of armed ambushers. One of the men silently cursed the bitter irony of their situation. Realizing the profound disadvantage of being ambushed by their target in a country where firearms were forbidden, before the thought could fully form, Ijin exploded into action, violently disarming the nearest man by smashing the assailant's face with his own gun. Without hesitation, he used the stunned man's body as both a shield and a projectile, hurling him into another attacker to neutralize them both in one brutal, fluid motion. When the brief chaos settled, Ijin stood alone and unharmed, a solitary figure amidst the incapacitated bodies of the entire team. As Ijin rushed the armed assailant, the suitor's subordinate scoffed internally at the foolish kid for charging a man with a weapon. But that judgment was shattered in an instant. Ijin closed the distance with incredible speed, becoming a blur to the ambusher as a powerful high kick connected with the man's arm, sending the weapon spinning through the air. Before the first foe could even recover, Ijin had already pivoted to his next target. He crippled the second attacker with a sweeping kick to the leg, then finished him with a swift, disabling strike to the side of the head. In mere seconds, he stood over the two defeated men, the threat utterly neutralized. In the still aftermath of the conflict, Ijin Yu stood over the terrified subordinate, an undeniable victor. The full, devastating scope of his work was laid bare. Defeated ambushers were strewn across the ground, surrounding the lone bodyguard as the subordinate knelt before him in total submission. From the background, the suitor watched on, his face a mask of utter shock at the overwhelming combat prowess he had just witnessed. Ijin then leaned down, his voice laced with pointed sarcasm as he threw the man's own dismissive assessment back at him. "Didn't you say being good at sparring isn't everything?" Quote. With a crisp and formal tone, the assistant began his report, relaying how Ijin Yu had successfully identified and pursued a known assassin whose target was Luan Bailey. He explained that Ijin had first been alerted to the potential danger by the oddly high security measures Mr. Bailey had arranged, a precaution that signaled something was wrong. The motive behind the attack was soon uncovered. Luan was investigating the various infractions of the family's second son and had been scheduled to receive crucial data from an insider at that very location. His superior correctly deduced that the second Bailey's son was behind the incident, a conclusion the assistant confirmed was supported by strong circumstantial evidence. The superior contextualized the attempt, noting that it gave credence to the rumors of a fierce succession struggle within the Bailey family. The assistant concluded his briefing with evident relief that the mission was resolved safely, mentioning that the Baileys had extended their deep gratitude for the successful intervention. In the midst of the meeting, Soa Lim looked pensive as she faced the corporate figure before her. She candidly admitted her own lack of business knowledge, yet followed this confession with a firm personal conviction. She simply could not do something, she explained, without a genuine sense of love and affection. The unexpected words prompted a look of surprise from her colleague, who questioned her use of such emotional terms. A silent, charged exchange then settled between them, her unusual motivation hanging strangely in the sterile corporate air. The mysterious woman offered Yeona Sin a final, cryptic warning, cautioning her that difficult choices like this would surely arise again in her future. She then explained she would no longer bother her, incorrectly referring to Ijin as Yeona's boyfriend, and citing a favor she owed him. Completely flustered by the assumption, Yeona loudly clarified that he was not her boyfriend. A look of understanding dawned on the woman's face as she correctly identified the girl from SW Corp. From her very reaction, it was clear that Ijin was merely a one-sided crush. Realizing her offer had been premature, the woman calmly rescinded her proposal, stating that it simply wasn't suitable for Yeona yet. With a resolute gaze, Soa Lim approached the corporate figure, stating plainly that she had a proposition for him. She laid her cards on the table, offering to give him complete control of the vast stocks she was set to inherit. Her intent was absolute. He was not simply to be a placeholder but was to run the entire company in her stead. The true purpose of this audacious gambit was then revealed. It was a desperate measure to block their shared rival, Yongho, from seizing the corporate throne. Unflinching, Soa asserted that he would receive no thanks for accepting her offer, as she considered it his solemn duty, a responsibility no different from that of a bodyguard sworn to protect their charge. As an unnamed woman reiterated her standing offer, promising to make it more than worth your while, a high-ranking SW executive's attention was elsewhere. His eyes were fixed on a news report scrolling across his phone, from which he looked up to declare that the future of the SW group was now safe. The executive then turned his grateful gaze directly to Ijin Yu, personally thanking him and attributing the company's newly secured footing to his actions. Their exchange was cut short, however, as the heiress Soa Lim suddenly entered the room, bringing their meeting to an abrupt halt. Amidst the corporate surroundings, an executive from SW approached Ijin Yu, his voice filled with gratitude. The man thanked him for everything, confessing how startled he had been by the incident of the previous day. He then made a profound declaration. Ijin's actions had personally ensured a brighter future for the entire SW group. Unmoved by the high praise, Ijin humbly replied that he was only doing his job, making sure to give credit to the rest of the security team as well. The executive fell into a deep silence, simply observing the young man's modest response. A voice cautioned Ijin Yu that a future of difficult choices and propositions awaited him. The interrogation then pivoted to a far more personal subject. As the speaker asked him what his dreams were, a pensive look crossed Ijin's face. He had to confess that he had never really thought about having any. The question was then rephrased. A new attempt to get an answer. What kind of work would he truly like to do? Faced with this, Ijin could only offer an awkward laugh, completely unable to respond. With a deep, respectful bow, an SW group executive offered his profound gratitude to Ijin Yu, proclaiming that the young man's actions had secured a brighter future for the company. Their exchange was cut short, however, as Soa Lim entered, striding purposefully toward the executive and interrupting the moment, fixing him with a determined gaze. She addressed him as Director Giwan, and laid forth a bold proposition. He was to use her inherited shares to run the company in her stead. Upon a quiet rooftop under the night sky, Ijin Yu came to a firm resolution. The life he had now was what truly mattered to him. His moment of introspection was abruptly broken by the appearance of Soa Lim behind him. Startled, Ijin demanded to know why she was there. She initially deflected, asking if he was still working, but he retorted, insisting she answer his own question. The air between them shifted as her expression grew serious, and she announced that she had come for a specific reason. There was something she had to tell him. With unwavering conviction, Soa Lim stated that she had no intention of running a company. Admitting she felt wholly unprepared for such a role, she then delivered a stunning proposition. If forced to take over through her inheritance, she wanted her colleague to have the company and run it instead. As the man reeled in shock, Soa calmly clarified her terms. While she would keep her shares as a memento from her father, he would be the one to wield true control and run the company in her place. The corporate figure countered Soa Lim's proposition, insisting it was hardly as simple or likely as she made it sound. With surprising honesty, Soa admitted she did not fully grasp the feasibility of her own audacious plan. She confessed that her words were driven not by calculation, but by the turbulent state of her heart, a desperate plea for him to understand her feelings on the matter. After a moment of his silent consideration, Soa pivoted. She skillfully reframed the proposal as a tantalizing opportunity for him, pointing out that it would grant him a decisive advantage over their rival, Yongho. Her meeting with the corporate figure concluded. Soa Lim turned and walked away. The man remained behind, watching her depart with a deeply contemplative expression. Wasting no time, Soa placed a call to Ijin Yu. He answered his phone, and she immediately asked if he had a minute to talk. Sitting alone, the old man's thoughts turned to his grandson, quietly wondering what Ijin was doing. An idea surfaced. Perhaps he should call him, invite him out for some ramen. He reached over and picked up his phone. His intent clear. Yet, after a moment of thoughtful hesitation, he placed the device back down on the table, deciding against the call in the end. With purpose in her stride, Soa Lim approached the corporate figure. She made a stunning declaration, her voice steady as she offered him everything she was set to inherit from the SW group. A flicker of surprise broke the man's composure as he listened intently, absorbing the weight of her radical proposal. An underling brought his boss the disquieting report. Gilsu Kang himself had been seen entering Dushik Cha's club. A wave of concern washed over the boss, who immediately understood the disruption Kang's unexpected return from Russia would cause. His subordinate offered a simple theory, suggesting that Kang and Cha might team up, since Cha had once worked for the man. The boss, however, swiftly dismissed the idea of an alliance. He knew that Dushik Cha lacked the necessary ambition to ever partner with a man as consumed by greed and ruthlessness as Gilsu Kang. As an underling discussed a past mess with his boss, he contrasted the leniency of Dushik Cha with the feared ruthlessness of another name entirely. Had they crossed Gilsu Kang instead, the man insisted, they would surely have been killed. At that very moment, a figure entered the room so silently it caught the gang boss completely by surprise. The boss demanded to know when the intruder had arrived, only for the man to reveal himself to be Gilsu Kang, calmly announcing he had just returned from Russia. Gilsu Kang, who was in town, on business, found Dushik Cha still, lying low, and did not hesitate to confront him. He questioned why such a formidable talent was being so carelessly wasted, directly challenging the man's passive lifestyle. With a calm demeanor, Dushik Cha deflected the inquiry, claiming he was simply lazy and that at his old age, nothing held his interest. Gilsu Kang, however, summarily dismissed the excuse about age and made his true purpose clear, extending the formal proposition for Dushik to join with me. Gilsu Kang laid out his audacious proposal, suggesting that if they partnered up, they could seize control of the entire country. After a moment of quiet consideration, Dushik Cha calmly rejected the offer, telling Kang to proceed without him. He explained that such a conquest required more than just muscle. It demanded high-level connections and a sharp business savvy, which he claimed to lack. With a final note of resignation, Dushik admitted that at his age, he simply couldn't be bothered with such an immense effort, cementing his refusal to join Kang's ambitious plan. As Gilsu Kang's car retreated into the distance, Dushik Cha's loyal underling cautiously approached. The man's unease was palpable as he questioned the purpose of the visit, voicing a fervent hope that his boss would not get involved with someone like Kang. In response, Dushik Cha sharply chided his subordinate for questioning his judgment, his stern tone making it implicitly clear that he was not a man to be so easily manipulated. As one of his men declared his loyalty, vowing to never again leave his boss's side, a faint smile touched Dushik Cha's lips. That quiet moment of acknowledgement gave way to one of pure physical exertion, where Ijin Yu strained through a demanding set of pull-ups. The instant he dropped from the bar, he was confronted by a figure standing directly behind him, Major Kang, who had appeared completely unexpectedly. With fluid ease, Ijin Yu hoisted his body upward, executing a series of one-armed pull-ups. A sarcastic voice suddenly cut through his concentration, questioning if all so-called trainees possessed such remarkable skill. Startled by the unexpected interruption, Ijin's grip failed, and he fell from the bar. He landed on the ground, looking up in surprise to find Major Kang standing over him, the source of the cutting remark. With a raw shout of, "Come on!" quote, Ijin Yu hauled his body upward, supported by the punishing strength of a single arm. The intense regimen continued as he transitioned to the floor, exploding into one-armed, clapping push-ups with absolute and unbroken focus. His form then became a blur of motion as he executed a rapid set of sit-ups, only to conclude the grueling circuit by inverting himself to perform a series of difficult handstand push-ups. Deep within a strenuous private workout, Ijin Yu powered through a set of demanding one-handed push-ups. His focus was suddenly shattered as Major Kang appeared unexpectedly, coolly observing the display. A sarcastic voice cut through the silence, commenting on Ijin's flawless persona as a perfectly normal teenager. Surprised by the interruption, Ijin's exercise came to an abrupt halt, and he looked up to meet the Major's gaze. Major Kang confronted Ijin Yu during a workout session. His arrival unexpected. The Major immediately revealed his knowledge of Ijin's new job as a trainee for SW Security and directly questioned the flimsy cover story. He pointed out the stark, unbelievable contrast between Ijin's lowly position and his exceptional combat abilities. In the face of this sharp inquiry, Ijin offered only a brief, non-committal response, downplaying the entire situation. The tense interrogation then dissolved, replaced by a vision of quiet domesticity where Ijin sat studying peacefully at home, enveloped by the warm presence of his grandfather, Da-yun, and his friends. Lost in his studies, Ijin Yu was interrupted by his sister, Da-yun. She kindly held out a tuna mayo rice ball, offering it to him as a simple snack. Ijin looked up from his desk, met his sister's warm smile, and accepted the food from her hand. As he held it, he was watched affectionately by both Da-yun and their grandfather, with his friends standing supportively in the background. His gaze then fell to the rice ball resting in his palm, and a quiet, profound thought surfaced from the depths of his past. He didn't need to do this anymore. The quiet evening found Ijin Yu focused at his desk, studying while his friends were settled on the floor behind him. The studious calm was gently interrupted when his sister, Da-yun, entered with a snack for him. Observing the peaceful gathering, his grandfather remarked on how tough Ijin's friends appeared, though they certainly didn't act the part. A faint smile touched Ijin's lips as he savored the simple, domestic moment. That tranquility, however, was shattered in the pre-dawn hours. Answering a sudden phone call, Ijin's calm expression vanished, replaced instantly by a look of serious concern. With impossible strength, Ijin Yu executed a perfect one-handed handstand push-up, his body a rigid line of controlled power that testified to his elite physical conditioning. As he held the position, a figure approached from behind, and the familiar voice of Major Kang cut through the quiet exertion. He addressed the young man first by his code name, 001, before allowing the name, Ijin, to follow. The Major's tone was thick with sarcasm as he questioned the boy's flimsy cover story, wondering aloud how a simple trainee could possibly be responsible for such a superhuman display of strength. Within the office building, the chaotic aftermath of a brutal fight was being examined by a police officer. An investigator's report cut through the disarray, confirming that the surveillance system's memory card was missing. This was no random brawl, but a meticulously planned attack. The voice continued, revealing that a mere 2 assailants had ambushed 6 of Cha's men, leaving 5 of the victims still unconscious. As these cold facts settled, Dushik Cha and his lieutenant stood in grim silence, their serious expressions reflecting the full gravity of the calculated assault. Within the confines of his office, Dushik Cha was approached by the newly arrived Mr. Kang, who wasted no time in bringing up the recent attack on one of Cha's establishments. A sardonic acknowledgement was all Dushik Cha offered, remarking on how quickly the news had spread. It was then that Mr. Kang fully revealed himself, stating that despite his time away, he still possessed connections and a keen knowledge of local events. The air grew thick with unspoken meaning as Dushik Cha fell into a tense, silent stillness, his expression hardening at the man's sudden appearance and his pointed statement. Dushik Cha brushed the matter aside, assuring Ijin not to worry and that he would handle it himself. Though Ijin accepted the man's confidence, he offered his assistance anyway, should the need arise. The offer gave Dushik pause, and he watched thoughtfully as the young man turned to leave. As Ijin's figure retreated, however, Dushik's internal thoughts revealed a starkly different intention. His true desire was to get Ijin out of the way as soon as possible. The perpetrators knew their brazen attack had put Dushik Cha on high alert, forcing them to move with far greater caution. Elsewhere, the fallout had already begun. Dushik Cha's lieutenant conducted his own brutal inquiry, interrogating a rival gang member who was forced to his knees. The kneeling man swore his group was not involved in the professional assault, questioning why they would ever commit such an act. His denial was coldly dismissed. The lieutenant retorted that their violent history alone made them a more than credible suspect. In a stark industrial space, Dushik Cha's lieutenant conducted a brutal interrogation of a captured rival, the bloodied man. bound tightly to a chair, insisted his group had nothing to do with the recent attack on Dushik-cha's men. After the questioning was over, the lieutenant was left alone with his thoughts. He considered the cold, professional efficiency of the assault and came to a chilling conclusion. None of the usual factions were responsible, leaving the true identity of their new, dangerous adversary a complete mystery. After informing his lieutenant that he was going to visit his injured men in the hospital, Dushik-cha received the man's acknowledgement and his plan to make rounds at their stores. Bidding his subordinate good night, Cha departed the office and began to walk alone. As he moved through the quiet surroundings, a heavy suspicion settled in his mind. The recent attack had been far too clean, executed with a level of professionalism that couldn't possibly be the work of a mere rival mob. Absorbed in the digital world of his online game, Ijin Yu listened to the playful jeers of his friends as they teased him about his performance. His focus was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of his sister, Da-yun, who entered his room and asked if he was going to meet with Mr. Cha. After he confirmed that he was, she presented him with a gift to deliver. Da-yun explained it was a thank you from their grandfather, who had mentioned that Mr. Cha was a great help to him. As his sister spoke, Ijin listened in silence, processing the unexpected revelation. Da-yun explained how Mr. Cha's men would appear each week, helping their grandfather with the heavy lifting as he sorted the recycling. She detailed their quiet kindness, how they would bring him drinks and supplies under the thoughtful pretense that they were just leftovers. Her words settled, and with his decision made, Ijin reached out and took the gift bag she held. He moved to the entryway to put on his shoes, and with the token of gratitude in hand, he left the house to make the delivery. Under the cover of darkness, Ijin Yu approached the building, ascending a flight of stairs before rapping his knuckles against the door. From within, an unseen eye scrutinized him through the peephole. In response to the silent observation, Ijin held up a gift bag and explained that his sister had sent him to deliver it. A moment passed before the lock turned, and the door swung inward, granting him entry into the room. Dushik-cha sat pensively at his desk, the quiet of the room a reflection of his deep contemplation. He called his lieutenant into the office, seeking a private word. A moment later, the subordinate entered, standing with formal rigidity before his boss. It was then that Dushik-cha finally spoke, his direct gaze meeting the other man's as he asked if their target, Mr. Kang, had been successfully placed under surveillance. An underling brought Dushik-cha's lieutenant a disappointing update. The men dispatched to track Mr. Kang had still not located their target. The subordinate carefully explained that the search was hampered by its very nature, forced to operate with limited resources to keep the mission a secret from their own boss. Progress was painstakingly slow. This news only deepened the lieutenant's private conviction. He voiced his suspicion that the timing of the recent ambush was too perfectly aligned with Mr. Kang's appearance to be mere coincidence, even if the boss himself thought it was nothing. A heavy, unspoken tension then settled in the air, the weight of his ominous statement lingering long after he had finished speaking. A wave of shock followed by searing anger washed over Dushik-cha's lieutenant upon his discovery of the terrible news. He entered his boss's office to deliver the report, finding the chairman as a solitary figure looking out over the sprawling city. As the lieutenant's urgent words filled the space, Dushik-cha listened in absolute silence, his back turned while he contemplated the gravity of the information. Only after the report was finished did he pivot to face his subordinate, his expression serious and utterly unreadable, bringing the tense encounter to a heavy, silent close. Under the cloak of night, three silhouetted figures stood high above the sprawling city, their gazes sweeping over the glittering expanse below. One of them raised a smartphone, its screen cutting through the darkness. On its display was a clandestine photograph of Ijin Yu and his sister, Da-yun, captured as they walked together, utterly unaware they had become the new prey. A flicker of confusion crossed Dushik's face as he questioned why Ijin's younger sister, Da-yun, would have possibly prepared food just for him. In response, Ijin offered a quiet, somber explanation. He and his sister had lost their parents when they were young, and as a result, she had done a lot of the cooking and found a certain joy in it. The weight of this newfound information hung in the air, and Dushik fell silent as he took in the truth of his friend's past, attempting to be a good host and steer them away from the heavy moment. He quickly offered to get Ijin something to drink. With his phone pressed to his ear, Ijin Yu walked away from his friend's location. His voice deceptively calm as he assured the person on the line that he was fine and already leaving. His abrupt departure was driven by a recent, unsettling memory. Dushik had only just arrived before trying to hastily excuse himself with a flimsy pretense about going to the store. The suspicion it sparked was enough for Ijin to act. Alone on the street, he ended the call, his thumb immediately scrolling through his contacts to dial a new number. The name, Major Kang Hamchan, lit up the screen, and the call connected to reveal the Major's serious and surprised expression on the other end. The brief moment of calm was shattered by a phone call. As Dushik listened, his expression tightened from placid to concerned upon learning that 2 more of his stores had been attacked the previous night. The situation then escalated catastrophically when his subordinate delivered the devastating news that Hyong-sok had been kidnapped by the assailants. Reacting with visible shock and a surge of urgency, Dushik turned to Ijin, abruptly stating that something urgent had come up and he had to leave immediately. Word reached Dushik of a devastating car accident involving his subordinate, Hyong-sok. The news, delivered by another underling, grew more sinister with each detail. While the other gang members involved were accounted for and hospitalized, Hyong-sok himself was missing, completely untraceable. A grim and determined look settled over Dushik's face as he made his priorities clear. Finding Hyong-sok came before all else. He then made a cold vow that only after his man was safe would they hunt down and deal with the culprits responsible for the attack. An air of palpable tension hung in the space between the 2 men as an enraged Dushik stood locked in a tense standoff with the villain. The antagonist's voice was the first to break the silence. His words a cryptic reply to a question left unheard. "That's what I'd like to know." Unmoved, Dushik cut straight to the heart of the matter, directly demanding to know the reason behind the attack. A mocking smirk twisted the villain's lips as he taunted Dushik with a question of his own. "How could I not?" The sarcastic retort was a clear and chilling implication. Such a large-scale, orchestrated attack could only have been ordered by someone with significant power and intimate knowledge of his affairs. With chilling clarity, the villain confirmed that luring Dushik to this very location had been deliberate. The motive for the attack was then laid bare. Dushik had recently exposed the weaknesses of a powerful politician, a man the assailant once served. A cruel taunt followed, mocking Dushik for underestimating the consequences and warning him that the big fish would not simply leave him alone. This was not the first time such powerful figures had tried to get him. The man revealed, and he made it clear they would never stop trying. The villain's lecture was cold, explaining that Dushik had to be made an example of, a lesson for anyone foolish enough to defy powerful figures. The taunts continued, revealing a chilling truth. It wasn't just one politician Dushik had crossed, but many who now targeted him. Without warning, a single, powerful punch was thrown, connecting squarely with Dushik's jaw. The force of the impact was brutal, sending a spray of blood erupting from his mouth. Thrown completely off balance, Dushik was sent reeling backward before he finally collapsed to the ground. Seemingly defeated by the devastating attack, convinced he was the primary target, Dushik demanded to know why his subordinate, Hyong-sok, had been involved. The villain confessed the abduction was direct retaliation, a consequence for being followed by Dushik's crew from the very beginning. But the grim situation had escalated. The employers who had hired the villain, he explained, despised Dushik and his associates so profoundly that they had increased the payment to include Hyong-sek's head. With a final, sadistic taunt, the villain told Dushik to say a final goodbye, making it chillingly clear that his subordinate was about to be killed. Upon finding his subordinate, Dushik commanded the badly injured Hyong-sok to look alive. As the younger man began to offer an apology, Dushik immediately cut him off, insisting that he alone was responsible for Hyong-sek's grievous condition. He then admitted that his primary emotion, above all else, was worry for his subordinate. In a staggering show of loyalty, Hyong-sok, despite his own severe injuries, turned the concern back onto his leader, reminding Dushik not to skip his meals. A cruel taunt met Dushik's ears as the villain reminded him that he should have said his last words. To Hyong-sok, consumed by a cold rage, Dushik made a solemn vow to personally kill the man standing before him should any harm befall his subordinate. The villain merely scoffed, dismissing the threat as if it were utterly meaningless. But the confrontation ended on Dushik's intense, unwavering glare, a silent, chilling reinforcement of the deadly promise he had just made. Amidst the utter chaos of Dushik's ransacked office, Ijin Yu placed a critical phone call. The voice that answered belonged to Major Kang Hamchan, who immediately sensed that something was gravely wrong. Ijin cut straight to the point, explaining that he needed a favor. When prompted for the details, his request was simple and cold. He needed the major to find a specific person for him. The conversation ended with Ijin's unyielding command, leaving no room for failure as he stressed that the mission must be accomplished, no matter what it takes. A call was initiated by Ijin Yu, its destination Major Kang Hamchan's personal phone. As the screen lit up with Ijin's name, a visible wave of stress washed over the major. He complained to himself, knowing from weary experience that a call from that particular number always, and without fail, signified the arrival of trouble. The captive's mind reeled as he internally confirmed the masked intruder's identity. It was, without a doubt, Ijin Yu. A wave of shock and profound confusion washed over him as he questioned why Ijin would possibly appear in such a place. The antagonist leader, however, interpreted the sudden arrival as a direct provocation from an individual named Dushik. With a furious snarl, he bellowed a command to his henchmen, ordering them to kill the intruder and to sweep the area outside for any hidden accomplices. Frustration twisted the antagonist leader's face as the truth dawned on him. He had been perfectly set up by someone waiting just outside. With his options exhausted, his hand plunged inside his jacket to retrieve a weapon. He withdrew a handgun, its dark metal a grim promise in the tense air. Without hesitation, he leveled the firearm directly at Ijin Yu, instantly creating a deadly standoff. Enraged by the assault, the antagonist leader gave a single, chilling order for his henchman, Anatoly, to draw his knife and kill Ijin. The man lunged forward, blade flashing, but the attack was cut short as Ijin's hand shot out, clamping down on Anatoly's wrist mid-strike. In a swift, overpowering motion, he disarmed his assailant, turning the weapon back on its owner and pressing the cold steel firmly against Anatoly's throat. With the henchman held hostage and the others already defeated, Ijin Yu simply stared down the stunned leader, the victor of a fight that had ended before it truly began. Ijin Yu stood amidst the still forms of the henchmen he had just felled. From a remote location, an antagonist leader observed the aftermath on a monitor and dispatched his subordinate, Anatoly, to handle the situation. The new combatant stepped forward, the sharp crack of his knuckles echoing the threat he posed as he charged. In the midst of his assault, Anatoly revealed his true danger by drawing a knife, but Ijin met the deadly lunge with practiced ease, skillfully deflecting the blade with his forearm guard. Without a moment's hesitation, Ijin countered. He seized Anatoly's weapon arm and drove a powerful palm strike straight to his chin, instantly neutralizing the more serious foe. Disbelief washed over the antagonist leader as he witnessed the fighter's impossible skill. His mind reeling with a single question. Who was this man? He immediately placed a call, demanding the location of someone named Naz, but a flash of fury crossed his face as the grim reality of betrayal settled in. Accepting the sudden turn of events, the leader fixed his full attention on the silent rescuer and demanded to know his name. When only a cold silence answered him, the leader's anger was replaced by a look of impressed calculation. He offered to pay the man 3 times whatever his current employer was offering to abandon his post and work for him instead. Stepping over the forms of fallen henchmen, Ijin advanced steadily toward the captive. A final combatant, a man named Anatoly, suddenly lunged at him. With fluid grace, Ijin dodged the attack, seized his opponent's arm, and incapacitated him with a single, powerful strike. From a distance, the antagonist leader observed the swift exchange, his mind reeling with shock. He knew Anatoly was a competent fighter. That Ijin's skill had been enough to force the man to draw his knife was astonishing enough. But to see him so utterly dispatched was something else entirely. Stunned by the sudden intrusion and the swift defeat of his men, the antagonist leader demanded to know the intruder's identity. From his position, The captive's eyes widened as he recognized the masked individual before him. In a flash, Ijin hurled a henchman's body toward the leader, who narrowly dodged the human projectile, his mind reeling at the attacker's exceptional speed. Snapping to action, the leader yanked a handgun from his desk drawer and leveled it at Ijin, ordering him to stop. A strange sense of admiration bloomed amidst the chaos. Impressed by such skill, he offered Ijin anything he wanted if he would agree to work for him. The gun and the proposition were met with utter indifference. However, as Ijin's focus remained singularly on his mission, his voice cutting through the tension with an ice-cold command. Let him go. With a powerful spinning kick, Ijin launched an enemy henchman clear across the room. As the man crumpled, another combatant named Anatoly moved in to confront him, escalating the threat as he drew a gleaming combat knife. Yet, before Anatoly could even mount an attack, Ijin closed the distance with a terrifying display of superior speed. A single, precise hand strike to his opponent's throat disabled him instantly. With a raw scream, the first henchman lunged, his fist hurtling toward Ijin Yu. Yet the attack met only air as Ijin sidestepped the clumsy assault, pivoting with fluid grace to drive a sharp elbow into the back of his opponent's head, instantly incapacitating him. Without a moment's pause, a second, larger attacker charged forward. Ijin met the incoming punch with a solid block, his hand immediately snaking out to grab the man's arm. He yanked the brute forward, pulling him completely off balance before delivering the final, decisive blow, a powerful kick that snapped against the side of the man's head and sent him crumpling to the floor. Unconscious. A sharp sound echoed, marking the end of the confrontation. With the threat neutralized, the captive looked toward Ijin Yu, his voice cutting through the quiet aftermath to ask why he had come. Ijin met his gaze and first admitted that the situation had evolved into a personal concern for him as well. He then elaborated, stating that even if it had not been personal, there was still plenty of reasons to have staged the rescue, revealing the deep-seated duty that drove his actions. A fleeting thought, perhaps a memory, echoed with a declaration of loyalty to employers who help him at work a lot, and had saved me from a mess. The moment shattered, returning to the present where the antagonist leader stared down at the fighter below. With a commanding gesture, he extended his hand, a clear invitation to form an alliance. He then made his pitch, offering a place by his side, a world away from any master, where he could finally be free and run as wild as you want. Even with Ijin's hand locked around his throat, the antagonist leader persisted in his attempt to recruit him. As he spoke, he secretly reached behind his back, drawing a handgun and aiming it directly at Ijin's head. The leader taunted his captor, explaining that no matter how fast a person was, a bullet would always prove faster. Yet, before he could act on his threat, Ijin moved in a blur, swiftly disarming and neutralizing the man, leaving him incapacitated on the floor. From the oppressive shadows where he had concealed himself, Ijin Yu listened. An enraged voice cut through the air as the group's leader, speaking into his phone, furiously vowed to kill not only his captive but a man named Dushik as well. That murderous promise was the only signal Ijin needed. He launched his assault, moving as a blur of speed that caught the guards completely by surprise. Before the first man could even register the threat, a single, swift strike to the neck incapacitated him instantly. A second henchman named Anatoly reacted, pulling a knife in a desperate attempt to defend himself. But it was useless. Ijin quickly disarmed him and neutralized the immediate threat with a flurry of precise, debilitating blows. As the antagonist leader leveled a handgun at Ijin, the youth internally mocked the man's amateurish technique. A one-handed grip was a fool's choice against a moving target. Before his opponent could even squeeze the trigger, Ijin surged forward with incredible speed, closing the gap in an instant. A single, sharp strike against the man's wrist sent the weapon flying upwards into the air, disarming him completely. In the quiet aftermath, Ijin Yu stood alone within the narrow alleyway, surrounded by the unconscious bodies of the defeated gang members. The view drifted down to the dazed face of one of the fallen gangsters, his eyes unseeing as he lay upon the ground. A past warning echoed in Ijin's thoughts, the bold claim that one could not stop Gilsu Kang with a single jab. But that assertion was shattered by the current reality. As the gang's leader himself, Gilsu Kang, lay completely motionless. Above them all, Ijin remained, a stoic figure standing watch over his vanquished foes. Looming over the wounded Dushik, the traitorous gangster mocked his former superior for his perceived weakness. He hefted a metal pipe high, callously declaring his intention to put the injured man to rest. For good. With a grunt, he swung the pipe down in a final, killing blow aimed directly at Dushik's head. In the fraction of a second before impact, Ijin Yu appeared, his bare hand shooting out to catch the weapon mid-swing. The would-be killer could only stare in utter shock as Ijin stood before him, calmly holding the pipe, having saved Dushik's life at the last possible moment. An older woman greeted Ijin at the apartment door, her words questioning why he had returned home so early instead of being out playing games. She promptly asked a favor, entrusting him to deliver a dish of food to the new neighbors who had just moved into Unit 404. Ijin agreed and took the container from her hands. As he walked away to complete the errand, the woman's voice followed him, thanking him by name and telling him to be careful. With the food in his possession, Ijin then proceeded down the hallway to make the delivery, even as whispers of admiration and unwavering allegiance passed between two of his gangsters, reaffirming their intent to follow their respected leader. Dushik was in a far graver state, injured and brought low to the ground. He was suddenly confronted by a traitorous subordinate. The turncoat revealed his hand, disclosing his knowledge that someone had recently wiped out Gilsu Kang and his men. The unexpected revelation struck the wounded boss with the force of a physical blow. Dushik flinched, his body betraying the sudden shock and surprise that coursed through him. With his hood drawn low, Ijin Yu moved like a shadow through the quiet street. His solitary path brought him past an older woman standing alone, her sharp voice cutting through the night as she argued into her phone, telling someone to stop playing games and just deliver the food. The mundane words reached him, and his impassive face was captured in a moment of stillness. He cast a brief glance back at the woman, a fleeting acknowledgement, before turning away. Without another pause, Ijin continued on, his form steadily disappearing down the dark expanse of the road. An older woman stood before a closed door, her voice laced with a familiar chiding tone as she scolded the unseen figure within for staying inside and playing games. Her worry, however, softened her words as she offered a bag of food. Concerned that the person inside was not eating properly, a hand emerged from the cracked open doorway to accept the meal before the barrier was sealed once more. Undeterred, the woman pressed on, telling him about a potential job opening for a pizza delivery driver. At this, the door swung fully open to reveal Ijin Yu. He had heard her suggestion, and his sudden appearance left the well-meaning woman completely surprised. Standing within the frame of a doorway, the older woman's gaze was cast downward, her expression a mixture of profound emotion and concern. She brought her hands together, clasping them tightly as she began to speak. The words that followed were thick and nearly lost to the overwhelming feeling, save for a single, clear phrase that pierced through the turmoil. For doing this, finally, completely overcome by a wave of gratitude, she bent at the waist, offering a deep and solemn bow to the unseen individual she addressed. Helpless on the ground lay the injured Dushik, his own subordinate looming over him. The traitor's voice cut through the air, questioning what else he was supposed to do, before declaring his true motive. With Dushik gone, he could finally get his life back in the country. With utter contempt, he rejected the very principles his leader lived by, mocking the notions of keeping the peace and staying loyal as nothing more than a foolish way to simply rot away. Within the hushed conversation of two underlings, a question arose as to why their respected superior, Dushik, intended to leave and set up his own business. His companion was quick to point out the unspoken truth. Dushik was seen by everyone as the natural successor to the current leader. Gilsu, the first gangster, conceded the point, affirming that Dushik was not only more popular but also a superior businessman. It was for this very reason, he explained, that Dushik chose to walk away, to avoid making trouble, and to remain on good terms with Gilsu. A quiet admiration settled between them as the second man concluded that for such a selfless act, Dushik was truly a man of honor. While two of Dushik's most faithful subordinates privately discussed their admiration for him and their intention to follow wherever he might eventually go, A traitorous gangster confronted the injured boss directly. With undisguised contempt, the man began to list Dushik's core values: loyalty, brotherhood, and the avoidance of conflict for the sake of peace, as if they were weaknesses. His verbal assault reached its peak as he told his leader to just get a desk job and stop giving gangsters a bad name with his soft approach. Leaning against a car for support, Dushik accused his subordinate of giving their group a bad name. He firmly stated his belief that it was wrong to betray and backstab one of their own, no matter the situation. Though Dushik acknowledged the traitor would never understand such principles, he promised that the man would still be held accountable for his actions. Already wounded, Dushik confronted his own subordinate, questioning how the man could dare attack him in such a weakened state. The subordinate, however, simply dismissed his leader's authority, calling him an old man, and telling him to worry about himself. In a flash of betrayal, the subordinate launched a powerful kick that struck Dushik directly in the head. The sheer force of the impact sent him flying backward through the air. As he reeled from the brutal blow, a furious curse ripped from his throat. "You little bastard." Quote. The grim view of a rain-soaked, dark alleyway dissolved, replaced by the sterile brightness of a clean apartment hallway. An older woman's voice cut through the quiet, her words questioning why someone had been out so late with their friends. She then voiced a familiar concern, fretting that they were spending entirely too much time gaming. Abruptly changing the subject, she asked if the food had been delivered to that nice man, and followed with a pointed instruction for them to be extra nice to the men in question. With a tray of food held steady in her hands, the older woman's voice cut through the air. She addressed an unseen person, her tone laced with disapproval as she scolded him for prioritizing games over a proper meal. Looking for a place to set down her delivery, she then asked where she should leave it. Before the subordinate stood a large stack of money, its purpose a complete mystery until he questioned his boss. The explanation was simple and direct. The funds were for the man's grandmother's surgery. Stunned by the revelation, the subordinate could only ask where his boss had managed to acquire such an immense sum. The boss, however, simply downplayed the amount, stating it was just enough to cover the bills and offering to provide even more if it were ever needed. The subordinate attempted to refuse the envelope of money, but the boss was insistent. He reminded the man that his grandmother had raised him and that he should try everything possible to help her, placing the envelope on the table with a quiet finality. The boss reiterated that they must do what they can for family while there is still time. Visibly emotional, the subordinate finally accepted the money and offered his thanks. With his head bowed low, a subordinate began to offer an apology, but the boss swiftly cut him off, insisting the man had nothing to be sorry for. The subordinate clarified his intent. His grandmother had passed away peacefully, and in her final moments, she had wanted to extend her gratitude. Hearing this, the boss expressed only his gladness that she had been able to die in peace. A subordinate delivered the grave report that Mr. Cha was now homeless, reduced to sleeping at a local spa. When his superior demanded to know the reason, the man explained that Mr. Cha had borrowed money and even used up his apartment deposit. The rumor, he added, was that this precipitous fall from grace was due to gambling. The superior met this news with stark disbelief, questioning aloud who could possibly possess the audacity to clean out a man like Dushik Cha. His subordinate could only agree, conceding that the perplexing circumstances were a puzzle to him as well. As the school day concluded, Ijin's friend approached him with an eager invitation to go play games. Before he could respond, a female friend interrupted them, asking Ijin if he had time to spare. She explained her desire to buy him ramen as a way to thank him for his help, an offer that left their male companion completely surprised. He questioned what she could possibly be thanking Ijin for, but she ignored his query entirely. Instead, she began to lead Ijin away, casually telling the other boy he could come along if he wished, leaving him standing alone with a dejected and utterly confused expression. In the quiet of the hospital room, the boss sat vigilantly at the bedside of his injured subordinate. The stillness was suddenly broken as the man began to cry, his words a torrent of profuse apologies. In response, the boss leaned forward, placing a comforting hand upon the man's shoulder. Brushing aside the apology, His voice was filled only with concern as he asked what was wrong and offered to get a nurse, making it clear that his subordinate's health was all that mattered in that moment. The boss stepped into the sterile silence of the hospital room, his imposing figure casting a long shadow over the bed. There, his subordinate lay still, a figure made almost anonymous by the heavy bandages that swathed him. Despite his condition, the injured man's eyes widened in recognition, and he fought to sit up in a gesture of ingrained respect. A firm but gentle hand pressed down on his shoulder, halting the pained effort and pushing him back against the pillows as the boss urged him to rest. Looking down at the broken man, the leader's voice was heavy as he confessed that these injuries were his own fault. The subordinate immediately refuted the claim, his loyalty unwavering as he insisted his boss had already done more than enough for him. The boss began to speak, his voice filling the quiet space where he sat at the bedside of his hospitalized subordinate. He questioned why the man was saying things like that, why he insisted on drawing a line between us. With a raw intensity, he emphatically stated that he considered them family. From the confines of the bed, the injured man stirred, his own voice finally rising to address his boss, as the subordinate reported that an unnamed person was surprisingly skilled with a knife. His superior questioned the very use of the word better to describe the proficiency. Their conversation was abruptly cut short by a knock at the door. An unidentified visitor entered the office and informed the superior that he no longer needed to worry about them. As the dust settled, a representative from the SW group approached the gang's boss, bringing with him a formal proposition. This was not a threat, but a reward for their crucial assistance in the rescue. His men were officially offered legitimate legal work within the powerful corporation. Elsewhere, far from these underworld dealings, Ijin was back in the mundane rhythm of school life. When a friend cheerfully invited him to go play games, Ijin politely declined, stating only that he had other matters to attend to. A male friend approached Ijin, commenting on how busy he had seemed lately before extending an invitation to go play some games. Just as the offer was made, however, a female friend swiftly interrupted, wanting to know if he was free that day. Her own unspoken plan was clear. A visit to a local TTEOKBOKKI restaurant hanging in the air as the destination for her proposed outing. Seated at an outdoor table, Ijin and his female friend shared a meal of instant ramen. She explained that it was only because of his help that she had managed to take care of things just in time. The statement immediately connected the dots for Ijin, revealing the reason behind her sudden offer to treat him to dinner. Seeing his realization, his friend simply smiled, affirming his unspoken conclusion. Ijin then playfully questioned her choice of ramen and kimbap as a proper dinner, to which she responded with a perfectly practical justification based on its excellent price and calorie count. As they walked together after school, a quiet relief washed over Ijin's friend. She reflected on her earlier concern, when his serious demeanor had led her to believe that something bad had occurred. With her worries now assuaged, she took the lead, guiding him down the street until they arrived at a ramen restaurant. The two then entered the establishment to have a meal together. The quiet tranquility of Ijin Yu's home was abruptly shattered by the chime of the doorbell. When she answered, her two friends practically exploded through the doorway, their faces flushed with uncontainable excitement. They rushed into her home, eager to deliver what they breathlessly called big news. The first bombshell dropped when one friend declared that Dayan's brother, Ijin, had been hit on by girls from another high school. A look of pure shock and disbelief washed over Dayan's face. But before she could even form a question, the other friend specified that one of the girls was the famous K-pop trainee, Yi-seul Chae. As her friends confirmed the celebrity's identity, Dayan's initial surprise faded, leaving a thoughtful and distinctly concerned expression in its wake. With unwavering confidence, the famous trainee Yi-seul Chae asked Ijin if he wanted her phone number, an offer that sent his friend Soyu into a flustered panic. A brief, heavy silence fell before Ijin delivered his flat, simple response. No. The blunt rejection shocked both Yi-seul and her friend into absolute stillness. Completely unfazed, Ijin merely told Soyu it was time to leave and began to walk away. As her friend checked to see if she was all right, a clearly embarrassed Yi-seul could only attempt to dismiss the undeniable refusal. As they walked away, Soyu remarked that Ijin could have turned the girls down nicely instead of being so defensive. With a serious expression, Ijin explained that he was guarded precisely because a complete stranger had suddenly asked for his contact information. A troubled look then lingered on his face, a silent testament to the cautious and unusual worldview that governed his actions. With faces alight in a flurry of excitement, two of Dayan's friends burst into her room. They breathlessly reported that they had just seen two girls approach her brother. Ijin, one of the friends, practically vibrating with the news, excitedly identified one of the girls as Yiseul Che, a famous K-pop trainee. They confirmed the unbelievable detail. Yiseul Che had asked Ijin for his contact information. As her friends lost themselves in the giddy gossip, Dayan's own expression grew visibly dark and angry. The simmering frustration finally boiled over, and she suddenly exploded, shouting, "You idiots!" at her stunned friends. Seething with anger, Ijin Yu decided he needed a truly spicy outlet to let off steam. He promptly called Major Kang Hamchan, declaring his intention to get out of school the next day and join Team 2 for their training. To his immense frustration, the major simply informed him that there was no training scheduled for the afternoon at all. The stillness of Ijin Yu's room was broken by a call from Major Kang Hamchan, who inquired about his availability for the afternoon. After confirming he had no plans at the moment, Ijin was informed that the major would visit following his training session. The call ended, leaving Ijin to sit in thoughtful silence. Elsewhere, a different kind of energy erupted as Dayan Yu's two friends burst into her room. Brimming with news, they excitedly revealed that girls from Jinyi High had just tried to get contact information from both Ijin and Soyu. Brimming with gossip, Dayan Yu's two friends arrived at her home. Their excitement palpable, they immediately announced that her brother, Ijin, and his friend Soyu had been approached by girls from Jinyi High who boldly asked for their phone numbers. A surprised Dayan had to confirm they were truly talking about her own brother. The friends then delivered the most stunning detail. One of the girls was the famous K-pop trainee, Yiseul Che, a revelation that left Dayan utterly shocked. They quickly clarified, however, that Ijin and Soyu had barely spoken to them and hadn't given out their numbers. A cool dismissal the friends interpreted as them masterfully playing hard to get. With a look of lingering disbelief, Yiseul Che's friend recounted the previous day's events. She remembered thinking how cute Ijin and Soyu Ko were when she and Yiseul had approached them. While she had immediately confirmed Soju's identity, she'd wondered just who the other boy was. Her shock was still fresh as she explained that this boy, Ijin, had refused to give Yiseul his contact information. She reasoned that they had simply left because the boys seemed too flustered and utterly inexperienced with the situation. But as she spoke, her tone began to sour, disbelief hardening into pure indignation. Who on earth did he think he was? She fumed. To reject someone like Yiseul? And as her frustration simmered, the day gave way to the next. As two of Ijin's friends made their way home, they remarked on how Ijin, Soyu, and Yeona had all disappeared the very moment school ended. One of them speculated that Yeona's hasty departure was specifically to see Ijin. His companion, however, grew wistful, pondering aloud what it must feel like to be as good-looking as their friend. With that thought hanging in the air, they made a new plan for their afternoon and decided to go to a PC bang. As two of Ijin's friends walked away from school, they were still reeling with disbelief that the famous trainee, Yiseul Che, had actually approached their group. One of them pointed out that with 3 boys present to match the number of girls, they could have easily gone on a group date, a thought that made him laugh. They both recalled Soju's flustered reaction during the encounter, commenting on how red his face had become. Their conversation then shifted to their classmate Yeona, who had left school early, leading them to speculate that she had gone off to find Ijin. Having exhausted the day's gossip, they finally decided to head to a PC bang together. As the school day concluded, 2 of Ijin's friends walked together, one eagerly reminding the other of their plans to check out some promotional games. His companion, however, was completely lost in thought, his mind replaying the moment girls had approached both Ijin and Soyu. Distracted by the memory, he walked directly into his friend's back. The first boy called out in annoyance at the sudden collision. But the second remained utterly preoccupied, the juicy gossip still swirling in his head. With the company's future looking brighter than ever, the chairman explained how Ijin's successful rescue of Luwen had secured several massively profitable new contracts for SW. As a direct result of this, he offered to personally compensate Ijin for the great profit he had single-handedly generated. Ijin, however, immediately declined the generous offer, stating that he was simply fulfilling his duties as one of the company's bodyguards. The chairman pushed back, arguing that the scale of the financial gain was too significant to overlook and that Ijin deserved fair compensation. Ever deflecting, Ijin identified himself as just a trainee, asserting that the entire security team had worked the job and should be rewarded collectively. The chairman clarified that the department was already receiving special incentives. This bonus was something extra, intended for Ijin's distinguished services alone. Voicing his sincere gratitude, the chairman declared that he could no longer overlook Ijin's hard work nor his previous refusals of any thanks, before the implied offer of a personal reward could even be fully articulated. Ijin immediately and firmly declined. The chairman, taken aback by the swift rejection, attempted to persuade the young man, mentioning how truly helpful such a reward would be for him. In response, Ijin remained utterly unmoved, standing in resolute silence as his decision held firm. Alone in his office, the chairman voiced his frustration, utterly baffled by Ijin's decision to refuse such a large sum of money. He turned to his aide, recalling that the boy had previously sent a significant amount from his mercenary days to a particular town. The aide confirmed this, reporting that Ijin had anonymously sent millions to fund the town's reconstruction. A stark realization settled upon the chairman. That donation accounted for everything Ijin had earned. This new information offered no clarity, only deepening his profound inability to understand the young man's motivations. It had long since been concluded by the chairman's aide that money held no sway over a man like Ijin. That fact was proven yet again when a superior from SW stopped him in the hallway. His expression one of knowing congratulation. The colleague praised him, remarking that the company's immense recent profit was a direct result of Ijin's actions and surely came with a hefty bonus. Ijin, however, cut through the assumption with a single, blunt statement. He had turned the offered reward down. In the stark confines of the hallway, an irate superior confronted Ijin, his voice sharp with anger as he demanded to know why the chairman's financial reward had been rejected without even knowing the amount. The man continued his tirade against the silent Ijin, calling him infuriating and naive for failing to understand that such an opportunity should never be passed up. Deciding to intervene, the superior declared that he would speak to the chairman on Ijin's behalf and ordered him to wait. In a quiet act of defiance, Ijin ignored the command and calmly walked past the stunned man. Left alone in the corridor, the superior could only scoff, dismissing the stoic bodyguard as nothing more than a naive kid, despite his mature appearance. Under the cover of night, Ijin walked home alone, his solitary journey ending as he approached the front door. The moment he stepped inside, his sister, Da-yun, greeted him with a warm welcome, briefly chasing away the evening's chill. That fragile peace was shattered, however, when their grandfather entered right after. His body hunched over as he clutched his back in obvious pain. A wave of panic washed over Da-yun, and she immediately rushed to his side, while Ijin could only look on, his expression hardening with deep concern for his family. The workday at SW had ended on a high note, with an announcement of an early finish and a company dinner to celebrate their recent success. Upon returning home, Ijin was met by his sister, Da-yun, but the quiet atmosphere was abruptly broken. Their grandfather appeared, leaning heavily on a co-worker for support as he clutched his back in visible pain. Seeing his condition, a startled Da-yun immediately rushed to his side in alarm. A buzz of delight had spread through the security team, its members openly crediting Ijin for the unexpectedly large bonuses they had all received. During the celebratory team dinner that followed, their gratitude took a tangible form. Colleagues showed their camaraderie by grilling meat specifically for him, fussing to ensure he was well fed. Ijin quietly ate amidst the attention, a calm center in their storm of appreciation. Observing this from a distance, an SW superior was privately baffled. questioning how a man so stoic and reserved could command such overwhelming popularity with the other men. Stepping through the doorway, Ijin was met by his sister, Dahyun, who asked if he had eaten. He confirmed that he had just come from a company dinner and, in turn, asked about their grandfather, learning the old man was running late. At that very moment, the sharp beeping of the keypad announced a new arrival. It's Grandpa, Dahyun identified, turning to offer a welcome. As the door swung open, however, their grandfather entered the home clutching his back, his pained posture a clear sign of his discomfort. The moment their grandfather returned home, concern creased Dahyun's features as he revealed he had pulled his back while helping a resident. She immediately took charge, instructing him to get into bed while she fetched a heating pad. All the while, Ijin observed the exchange in silence, his expression shifting into one of deep worry and heavy contemplation. After Dahyun assured Ijin that she would stay with their grandfather, the old man expressed his regret for causing them to worry. The quiet interaction concluded with a lingering focus on Ijin's troubled face, his features etched with the weight of an internal conflict over his family's fragile well-being. With thoughts of a bonus for his family fresh on his mind, Ijin turned to his grandfather and asked if his job was difficult. The old man conceded that his work wasn't easy, prompting Ijin to press further, questioning if his grandfather would rather not be working at all. In an effort to soothe his grandson, the older man reassured him that it wasn't that bad, musing that no job was ever truly easy. He then expressed his gratitude for simply being able to work at his age. Puzzled by the uncharacteristic inquiry, the grandfather finally asked Ijin for the reason behind his sudden concern. Sensing the boy's unspoken concerns, the grandfather began to speak, assuring Ijin that he had already saved enough money to cover Dahyun's college tuition and even her future wedding expenses. He then made a heartfelt promise to also send Ijin to college and support him until he could be fully independent. The old man went on, reminding Ijin of the insurance money their parents had left behind, clarifying that this separate fund was being kept safe, untouched for both Ijin and Dahyun for when they were ready to live on their own. As his grandfather's words settled in the quiet air, Ijin offered no response, his expression turning distant and contemplative. Upon his return from work, Ijin's grandfather settled down with a weary groan, a hand instinctively moving to clutch his aching back. His pained posture did not escape his grandson's watchful eyes, and noticing the boy's deep concern, the old man offered a reassuring word, telling him not to worry. To further ease the boy's mind, he then revealed a closely guarded truth. He had diligently saved a great deal of money from his factory job, all of it set aside for their family's future. In the quiet that followed, Ijin simply acknowledged the weight of his grandfather's sacrifice with a silent affirmation. With his gaze fixed upon the untouched food before her, Yongho Sin finally questioned why Yeona had not eaten. She replied simply that she did not feel well, an excuse he met with a cold, condescending remark, telling her that her health was her own responsibility. That was all it took. Yeona met his eyes and directly accused him of the entire deception, stating that this supposed business trip was nothing but an orchestrated setup for a marriage proposal. The weight of her words hung in the air, leaving Yongho to react with nothing but a stark, telling silence. The justification echoed in her mind. The meeting was supposed to be beneficial for everyone, and it had been Yongho's own proposal. But a hot indignation followed as she understood he had gone directly to this man, Luan, without ever asking for her opinion. The words came back to her then. The excuse she'd been fed about Luan having trouble with his careless past relationships. Suddenly, it all connected to a past event. A deal had collapsed, and now she saw it was because she had personally turned the man down. That flimsy story, she speculated, must have been nothing more than a convenient excuse Luan gave to Yongho. A polite cover for her own rejection. With calculated calm, Yongho Sin proposed that Yeona should study abroad for a while, but the offer was a thinly veiled command. He revealed that he had, in fact, already made all the arrangements for her departure and even planned to find her a suitable partner while she was away. Internally, Yeona recognized this for what it was. Another of Yongho's controlling maneuvers designed to dictate her life. A silent decision was made. Yeona stood from her seat, a deliberate motion that prepared her for the confrontation. With a newfound firmness, she utterly rejected his plan. Her voice clear as she said, "That's a no." A flicker of surprise, which quickly curdled into anger, crossed Yonho's face as he pointed out that she had never, not once, disobeyed him before. Yonho Sin silently contemplated the recent shift in mindset he had observed. Turning his attention to Yeona, he patronizingly remarked that she was now at an age to be interested in dating. His seemingly casual observation soured, however, becoming a veiled threat as he warned her that no good would come from pursuing any romantic interests. Just then, another female relative arrived, her sharp voice dripping with sarcasm as she confronted Yonho for prioritizing his cousin over his own sister. Upon her arrival, the Sin family relative promptly dismissed Yeona, coolly stating that she and her brother, Yonho, had some catching up to do. Yonho, however, immediately and aggressively questioned her presence, demanding to know why she was there. The woman answered with biting sarcasm, claiming she had only come for tea since it had been such a long time. The pleasantries were short-lived. Dropping the pretense entirely, she confronted him about his new business already falling behind its goal, pointedly suggesting he had no time to be idle. Yonho Sin coldly dismissed his relative's fiancé's family as humble, framing their new ties as nothing more than a necessary business transaction for profit. Pushing back, the woman defended her fiancé and cautioned her brother about the slow nature of the arms industry. Yonho then accused her of hypocrisy, claiming she had only chosen her partner to win their grandfather's favor. The bitter confrontation fell into a tense silence as the two relatives stared each other down. At last, the woman turned away, only to stop in surprise upon seeing Ijin Yu and Soyu Ko still standing there. She immediately demanded to know why they had not yet left. Inside the car, a heavy truth began to unfold as Yona's attendant spoke to Soyu Ko, revealing the suffocating history she shared with Yonho Sin. A series of recollections from years past painted a stark picture of a life lived under another's will. From the time she was a small child, Yonho had made all of Yona's decisions for her. His absolute control had shaped her business education and reached into the most intimate aspects of her existence, culminating in his selection of her fiancé. The attendant concluded his somber explanation with a bitter, ironic twist, stating that Yonho had always been watching out for her. A final remark that cemented the man's deeply manipulative nature in Soju's mind. Before Soyu Ko, the heavy truth was finally laid bare. Yona's attendant explained that Yonho Sin's obsessive interest was never born of care, but of a desire to control her completely. This insidious manipulation had only worsened, the attendant revealed, tightening its grip after the death of Yona's father left her vulnerable. As a stark example, he offered a memory from the past. It had been Yonho's will, not Yona's, that had forced her into an overseas student exchange program. The revelation hung in the air, prompting Soyu to press further, demanding to know the underlying reason for such a suffocating obsession. The heavy truth fell from the lips of Yona's attendant, laid bare for Soyu Ko. Yonho Sin's ultimate goal, she explained, was to gain control of Yona's shares in SW Corp. The revelation deepened, exposing a lifetime of manipulation that had begun in childhood. Since her parents' deaths, Yonho had ruthlessly used her as a pawn in the vicious battle for corporate succession. A weighted silence descended as the group walked onward, and Yona's expression grew visibly dejected, lost in her own thoughts. A sharp guilt surfaced as she lamented having to make yet another engagement, when she was supposed to have been gaming with someone. With the tension of the earlier confrontation finally behind her, Yona cheerfully suggested to her bodyguards that they stop for instant noodles and triangle kimbap. Mentioning that they still hadn't had dinner, her attendant was quick to point out that she had, in fact, already eaten with Mr. Sin. Yona admitted, however, that she had been far too upset during the dinner with her relative to have had any appetite. A bright smile then bloomed across her face. Her mood significantly improved as her bodyguards looked on in silent assent, ready to accommodate her impromptu request. Tension mounted in the hallway as the two groups of bodyguards squared off in a silent, rigid standoff. At the head of the rival team, A man with a prominent scar radiated an unshakable confidence as he confronted Ijin and Soyu. He declared their duty finished, informing them that his own people would be taking over Yona's security detail from that moment forward. While the verbal challenge hung heavy in the air, Ijin's focus was already elsewhere, his eyes methodically performing a thorough scan of the surroundings. Resolved to no longer be a passive observer, Soyu steeled himself to take action. Just then, a new security team appeared, fronted by a man with a distinctive scar across his face. The rival leader authoritatively announced that his team was taking over Miss Yona's escort duties. From that moment forward, without hesitation, Soyu stepped up to confront him, his voice sharp with anger as he questioned the man's sudden takeover and accused him of flagrantly violating company protocol. With a sharp voice that cut through the air, the man with the scar aggressively confronted Ijin and Soyu. He hurled the accusation of their shamelessness for all to hear, questioning how they dared to continue as Yona's bodyguards. He threw their greatest failure back in their faces, citing the fact that the young lady had been kidnapped while under their protection as undeniable proof of their incompetence. His voice rose as he challenged the very notion of their employment, demanding to know how anyone could possibly trust him again after such a critical failure. Yet, as the words hung in the air, Ijin and Soyu stood stoically, absorbing the public accusation without an immediate response. With his voice leaving no room for argument, the SW chairman declared that his decision was final, for the matter had already been addressed with the chief secretary. He callously belittled the security team's pride, insisting they step aside and let the incoming experts take over the operation. The chairman then lauded the replacement team, highlighting their extensive experience protecting prominent world leaders. This proved too much for the leader of Security Team 3, who interjected to defend his own team's status as seasoned professionals. The chairman's patience snapped. He angrily countered, citing the recent kidnapping of the very person they were hired to protect as undeniable proof of their failure and complete lack of expertise. The SW executive cut off Major Kang Hamchan, silencing him with a cool assurance that everything would be fine and a firm command to stand down. As she turned and walked away, the major called out after her, demanding to know what her next move was. A determined expression settled upon her face as she announced without hesitation that her plan had already begun. Within the classroom, Soa Lim turned from her desk to address Ijin Yu. She informed him that both Yona and Soyu were not at school that day. Upon receiving the information, a serious, contemplative expression settled upon Ijin Yu's face as he processed her words. Standing in the school hallway, Ijin Yu's expression turned serious as he looked down at his phone. A message illuminated the screen, delivering an abrupt and startling update. Security Team 3 had been removed from Yona's protection detail, effective immediately. A second text quickly followed, a brief promise from the sender to explain the situation in person at a later time. Ijin slowly lowered the device, the silence of the corridor closing in as he quietly processed the unexpected news. A raw sense of outrage rippled through Security Team 3 as one of its subordinates vehemently questioned their dismissal, his disbelief palpable. Yona's safety had been their sole responsibility. His superior, the team leader, could only offer a grim confirmation, formally declaring that they would no longer escort the young woman until new orders were handed down. The true architect behind the unsettling change was soon revealed, as Yongho Sin spoke over the phone, his voice betraying the cold calculus of his decision. He had orchestrated the entire bodyguard swap, callously planning to send his own daughter abroad, not for her safety, but to advance his personal business interests. The executive subordinate confirmed her concerns, explaining that hiring an outside PMC was a significant problem not just for one team, but for the entire SW security department. She asked for an update from the chief security officer, but the reply was a frustrating void. There had been no feedback. A grim realization settled in as she speculated this had been Mr. Sin's plan from the start, prompting her to question the true skill level of his chosen security unit. The firm, her subordinate revealed, was Iron, a world-class PMC that Mr. Sin had been employing for some time. When the executive demanded to know how Iron's agents compared to their own internal team, He clarified that a direct comparison was difficult due to their different fields of operation, yet began to analyze their private security services all the same, as her subordinate detailed the foreign PMC's overwhelming effectiveness in overseas situations. A result of their vast data, diverse agents, and extensive experience, the executive found their impressive reputation thoroughly confirmed. At first, she simply connected Mr. Sin's decision to his many ongoing international projects. A logical if shallow conclusion. But she knew the man. He was a chairman who trusted only the cold, explicit terms of an ironclad contract over the fickle nature of personal loyalty. With that understanding, the true reason for hiring an outside firm crystallized in her mind. His paranoia had taken root, and he now feared a spy was already operating from within the SW security department itself. With the situation laid bare, Major Kang Hamchan confirmed her awareness and then cut directly to the heart of the matter, demanding to know what her next move would be. In the weighty silence that followed, the executive offered no immediate reply. Instead, she deliberately and meticulously placed her phone into her bag, the simple action drawing out the tension. Only when the device was tucked away did she finally look up. Her gaze sharpened with a steely determination, ready to deliver her answer. With a look of sheer distress, Soa Lim stormed toward Ijin Yu, declaring the unfolding situation with Yeona completely ridiculous. She broke the news that their friend would no longer be coming to school, for she was being made to transfer. Soa's voice hardened with anger as she clarified that Yeona was being sent to study abroad. A move that was entirely against her wishes. It was her father, Soa explained, who was forcing the decision upon her. He had even taken away Yeona's phone, severing her connection to all her friends. Her explanation finished on a note of pained frustration, lamenting the absolute unfairness of it all as Ijin stood by, quietly processing the grim revelation. Over the phone, a subordinate reported to Young-ho Sin that his daughter, Yeona, had cleared her schedule and was now sulking in her room. Mr. Sin dismissed the girl's emotional state as entirely unimportant. His true, manipulative intentions were then laid bare as he instructed his subordinate to begin scheduling meetings for Yeona with suitable heirs the moment she was sent to study overseas, using her future for his own business alliances. A phone call came for Young-ho Sin, the voice on the other end heralding a recent development as very good news. The caller continued, respectfully reaffirming that Mr. Sin was a very important client and pledging their services for any matters that might arise in the future. Once the call concluded, however, Young-ho Sin was left alone with his thoughts, reflecting on the grim reality of the situation. His rival, Ga Sin, had successfully secured an arms deal for the SW Group, a victory she had sealed through a recent engagement. Within the polished confines of his office, Ga Sin declared his refusal to simply sit by and let another have their way. He coldly vowed that while someone else may have built the bridge, he would be the one to cross it toward greener pastures. His hand reached for a framed photograph on his desk, lifting it for a closer look. It held a memory of a younger Ga Sin and Young-ho Sin together. A quiet testament to a shared past they had once built. Staring down at the captured moment, a wicked smirk twisted Ga Sin's lips, confirming the cold finality of his intent to betray his former colleague. In the quiet of her office, the executive from SW resolved to make her next move. This decision brought her to a meeting with Major Kang Hamchan, who immediately questioned her intentions. Unfazed, the executive began her explanation, citing the chairman's recent and alarming decision to hire a foreign private military company as the very reason for her actions. Within the formal office, the chairman's words landed with sudden, crushing weight as he informed Yeona that her flight was scheduled in a mere 2 days. A wave of shock and distress washed over her at the impossibly short notice. The chairman, however, dismissed her reaction with icy disregard, explaining that all arrangements were already complete. The tight schedule was a necessity, dictated by the sheer number of people she was required to meet. His voice then turned stern, an undeniable order cutting through the air as he instructed her to have all of her local affairs settled by then. The command was absolute, leaving no room for negotiation. Unhappiness clouded Yona's features as the chairman began to speak. reminding her that he had already explained her responsibilities. He lectured her with cold authority, making it clear that her duty to act for the benefit of SW Corp was the steep price she paid for her privileges. A final, chilling warning was issued. She was not to make the same mistake again. Left in the crushing silence that followed, a defeated Yeona looked down, absorbing the full weight of his command. In the midst of a grueling personal workout, Ijin Yu answered a call from his classmate, Soa. She explained that she had wanted to invite him to eat and play a video game with their friends. Jaehyung and Soyu, realizing he was otherwise occupied, she asked if she had called too late, an idea he quickly denied. Soa then expressed her surprise, remarking on the fact that he was still training on his own even after his daily sessions with the security team. The familiar voice of his classmate Soa reached Ijin through the phone. Her words a bridge to his other life. She began by remarking on his formidable skills in training, observing with a hint of amusement that the other bodyguards were now scrambling to compete with him. Her tone then shifted as she mentioned their friend group was supposed to have met at a game room that day. Lest he worry, she quickly reassured him that no one was upset by his absence, but had only been wondering where he could be. A playful sigh followed as Soa lamented the missed opportunity to showcase her newly honed gaming abilities, confessing that she had practiced specifically for the chance to defeat Jaehyung after he had teased her about her playing. On the other end of the line, Soa's voice was an enthusiastic torrent, chattering on about their friends. She boasted confidently of her superiority over Soyu and then firmly vowed to get Jaehyung off her case. Ijin simply listened, a slight smile touching his lips as he enjoyed the effortless flow of the normal, friendly conversation. The call soon came to an end, and he was left hanging up his phone in the quiet that followed. Standing resolutely before the chairman in his office, Ijin's mind turned to a memory of his grandfather and the lesson he had once been taught. He gave voice to that long-held wisdom, defining a family as a group of people who are on the same side, no matter what. The profound statement left the chairman visibly shocked and taken aback. It was for this very principle, Ijin explained, that he had come, adding with finality that they now needed to prepare, implying a sudden and decisive change of plans. On a balcony under the vast night sky, Ijin Yu received a call from his classmate, Soa Lim. Her voice carried the familiar names of their friends, Jaehyung and Soyu, followed by a cheerful invitation for him to come over to her house the next day. His gaze drifted over the sprawling city lights as he politely declined, explaining only that he would be busy. After a brief, disappointed acknowledgement from Soa, Ijin ended the conversation, leaving him to stand alone in the quiet, his expression turning pensive in the moments that followed. A sudden vibration broke the quiet as Ijin's phone announced an incoming call from his classmate. Soa, he answered, and her cheerful voice immediately came through, informing him that she had returned home safely. She added that their friends, Jaehyung and Soyu, would also be back soon. With a playful tone, Soa then challenged Ijin to start practicing a video game in advance, so the two of them could beat their friends together. To her enthusiastic proposal, Ijin calmly agreed. The focus settled tightly on Ijin Yu's face as Yona's voice reached him, explaining that it was Yonho who intentionally kept them apart. She revealed the terrible truth of her situation. Yonho had threatened to harm those closest to her if she did not comply with his orders. With the full weight of her predicament laid bare, she asked Ijin directly for his thoughts, placing the emotional burden squarely upon his shoulders. As her words hung in the air, a memory surfaced in Ijin's mind, a vision of Yeona laughing with pure, unadulterated happiness. The recollection was a stark and painful contrast to her current distress, emphasizing just how much more she used to laugh in a time before this coercion began. Tears streamed down Yona's distraught face as she finally spoke her truth to Ijin. With a voice trembling with sorrow, she confirmed what he had once told her, that she had, for a brief time, been truly happy and relaxed. That fleeting peace, however, was a luxury she could no longer afford. She revealed her heart-wrenching motivation. She simply could not allow those guys to be hurt because of her. As her confession settled in the heavy air, Ijin listened intently, his expression completely cast in shadow. All that could be seen was the grim, unwavering determination that hardened in his eye as he processed the immense weight of her sacrifice. As the chairman spoke into his phone, he finalized his plans to have a young woman settled there for good, reasoning that she was now grown up. In that very moment, a figure walked purposefully through the doorway. It was Ijin, and he entered the office without pause, prompting the chairman to turn in surprise. Acknowledging the intruder's unexpected presence, the chairman commented that he didn't usually entertain such humble company. Summoned on short notice, Ijin faced the chairman, who began the meeting with an apology for the sudden call. The older man asked Ijin to confirm that he had met with Yeona the previous day. But Ijin bypassed a simple affirmation. Instead, he answered with a pointed observation, stating directly that Yeona seemed in need of her family. The weight of his words immediately silenced the chairman, whose expression became both contemplative and troubled by the unexpected declaration. The chairman spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of his immense responsibility, explaining how the livelihoods of many, and even the country's economy, depended on SW Corp's stability. He justified his actions by claiming he could not prioritize his own kin, as any favoritism could jeopardize the company and bring ruin to the powerless people who relied on it. Ijin acknowledged the logic of his position but immediately cut through it with a stark reminder. To Yeona, he was not a corporate entity, but simply her grandfather and family. To underscore this truth, Ijin began to share his own traumatic past, recounting the loss of his memory and the life of constant battle he had endured. A harsh existence that had taught him the profound, irreplaceable value of the very family the chairman had dismissed. A memory surfaced within Ijin Yu, bringing forth the vision of his grandfather weeping as he held him in a powerful embrace. He realized then that he didn't need to recall his forgotten past to understand the truth of his situation. It was his grandfather, in that single, heartfelt moment, who had taught him the true meaning of family. A profound silence followed, allowing the weight of his declaration to settle completely. An assistant approached Yongho with an update, reporting that Miss Yeona had not left her residence since the prior incident. Yongho confirmed that 2 days had passed before pointedly asking if she had met with the trainee bodyguard. Ijin, upon learning that she had not, a sliver of satisfaction crossed his features as he concluded that Yeona had finally come to her senses. He then reflected condescendingly on her past, recalling that she had, after all, always caught on quickly. As Yongho reached out, aggressively grabbing for Yeona's arm while insisting she get in his car for a scheduled meeting. His advance was abruptly halted. Ijin stepped forward, his own hand clamping firmly around Yongho's wrist to intercept the unwanted contact. A furious Yongho turned on him, demanding to know who he was. Unfazed by the outburst, Ijin calmly introduced himself as a trainee bodyguard. Dismissive of the title, Yongho ordered him to get lost. But Ijin stood his ground. He stated with unwavering resolve that he could not let Yongho take Yeona, because she clearly did not want to go. The tense standoff was abruptly shattered by a sharp cry of, "You guys!" In an instant, every participant in the confrontation, from Ijin to Yongho, swiveled in surprise toward the source of the voice. A group of men in dark suits had arrived, their presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. From the center of his entourage, their leader, Major Kang Hamchan, stepped forward, asserting his authority over the gathering. He then surveyed the area, his expression serious and commanding as he took in the situation. Word arrived from his assistant that a corporation urgently wished to meet with Miss Yeona, and Yongho gave the command without a moment's hesitation. They were on their way. For within his mind, a cold calculus was already at work. Yeona, he mused, was the best kind of acquisition they could hope for. A perfect key that would not only grant the corporation entry into the Korean market but also establish invaluable ties with the global company. SW. His path forward was brutally simple. He would select the best offer for her. A decision that would, in turn, let him waste all the other players in the race. As this ruthless strategy solidified, a smug, calculating expression settled upon his features. Ignoring Yeona's reluctance, Yongho grabbed her wrist and insisted she come with him to meet the chairman. As he began to pull the struggling girl toward the car, a hand suddenly clamped down on his own wrist, stopping him cold. Shocked and angered by the trainee bodyguard's intervention, Yonho turned to confront the source of this interference. A tense, silent standoff ensued as Ijin and Yonho locked eyes, the air thick with unspoken challenge. A luxury car stood waiting, poised for departure. One of Yonho's men, serving as his driver and guard, approached the vehicle to deliver a status report. He informed his superior that according to a new traffic update, they had to leave at once to remain on schedule. From within the car's quiet interior, Yonho listened to the news, his expression hardening into a cold mask of impatience that betrayed his growing frustration with the delay. An angry glare twisted Yonho's features as he found his path to Yeona blocked. His hands shot out, grabbing Ijin aggressively by the collar while he demanded to know what the boy wanted. Yet, in the face of such open hostility, Ijin remained perfectly stoic, his expression impassive and completely unreadable. He offered no reaction to the threat, but instead, calmly patted the hand that was clutching his shirt. Then, with a disarming coolness that seized control of the entire confrontation, Ijin repeated the very same question right back at him. Yonho's hand shot out, seizing the arm of Ijin, who stood as a barrier between them. Despite the aggressive gesture, Ijin remained completely stoic, an unmoving wall of resistance against the attempted physical intimidation. Finding the guard immovable, Yonho bypassed him, addressing Yeona directly with an insistent voice. He told her to ignore everyone else, to just say what she wanted. All the pressure of the moment then fell upon Yeona, who appeared deeply distressed by his demand, leaving the confrontation hanging at a tense and unbearable peak. His mind made up, Yonho aggressively commanded Yeona to get into the car. He reached out, his hand snaking forward to grab her arm and pull her into the vehicle. Before his fingers could make contact, however, Ijin moved, stepping swiftly in front of Yeona. With a single, decisive motion, he planted his own arm firmly against the car's doorframe, physically blocking Yonho's access to the girl he now shielded. The aggressive action froze. Yonho's hand stopped just short of Ijin's unyielding arm, the direct intervention leaving no room for doubt. With a furious snarl, Yonho ordered Ijin to move out of his way, but the command was met with a calm refusal. Ijin simply stated that he could not. Enraged by the defiance, Yonho threw a punch aimed squarely at Ijin's face. The blow never landed. Ijin effortlessly caught the speeding fist in his open palm, the abrupt stop leaving Yonho in a state of shock. At that precise moment, the tense standoff was shattered by the arrival of Major Kang Hamchan, who questioned the source of the commotion. The major calmly addressed the aggressor as Director Choi, revealing a prior acquaintance and instantly de-escalating the immediate physical threat. Just as Yonho moved to slam the car door on Yeona, Ijin Yu threw himself in the way, his own body and arm blocking the forceful motion. Enraged by this blatant defiance, Yonho turned on him, his hand raised high to deliver a punishing strike. Yet, before the blow could land, Ijin's hand shot out, deftly catching his attacker's wrist mid-swing. He held it fast in a powerful, unyielding grip, freezing the moment in a tense physical standoff. The charged silence was abruptly shattered by a voice calling out Yonho's name. Major Kang Hamchan had arrived. Following the confrontation, Ijin's expression was a mask of cold determination. The weight of his defiance settled upon Yeona, and a dreadful realization began to dawn in her mind. Yonho would never forgive such a public humiliation. She recalled how fiercely Ijin cared for his family, and a chilling conclusion took hold. He would undoubtedly seek his revenge by targeting them. Just as her fear crested, the sharp blare of a car horn sliced through the tense standoff. A vehicle pulled to a stop, and from it emerged the imposing figure of Major Kang Hamchan, his sudden appearance catching everyone completely by surprise. Yonho belittled Ijin, sneering that being young and reckless was no excuse for his actions. In the face of this scorn, Ijin calmly responded that he was simply performing his duties as Yona's bodyguard. Utterly frustrated by the boy's composure, Yonho complained aloud that kids these days had no grasp of reality. With his patience spent, he decisively commanded his subordinate to get rid of Ijin and force Yeona into the car, escalating the tense confrontation. As Yonho aggressively grabbed Yeona's wrist to force her away, his efforts were abruptly halted when Ijin Yu stepped forward and seized his arm, physically stopping the coercion. A shocked and angered Yongho immediately confronted the newcomer, demanding to know who he was. Ijin, however, remained calm and simply told him to let go of Yona's hand. The command sent Yongho into a rage. But just as he moved to retaliate, the sharp screech of tires cut through the tension. A car pulled to a sudden stop beside them, and from within emerged Major Kang Hamchan, his presence instantly interrupting the volatile standoff. A military officer, Major Kang Hamchan, suddenly arrived. His voice boomed with anger as he loudly confronted the group, demanding to know precisely what it was they were doing.